I think we'll give it just one more minute. I believe police should be joining us soon.
That sounds good.
Oh, I see police is here.
Police is here. If you don't mind, give me one more minute to get everything posted on our website and everything.
Yep, of course.
Thank you. All right, if you guys are ready, then we can get going.
Okay, great. Thanks. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
So I apologize, so I'm kind of juggling a couple of things tonight, but go ahead, Rebecca.
So thanks everybody for joining. I thought we would start just by letting you know that police, Will and I had a great conversation with someone from the Department of City Planning, where we went through almost line by line. We got close through last year's budget priority requests, I will send this spreadsheet I will share this spreadsheet in the chat, or ask Will to, where essentially DCP has been studying agency responses. And I'm sure everyone who's a regular of this budget committee meeting remembers how frustrating we always get when we get a response that says, further study is needed, even though we changed our request to be, we would like to get a study to build X, Y, and Z. So I'm happy to share this. I think something for the committee to consider. They gave us very good advice on how to restructure some of our requests and some of our, the specific details about that request to hopefully get a better answer this year. We're happy to discuss those all with you, or we're happy to work on those, to make sure the requests are as good as we can on our own, and you guys can focus on the order of your requests and what you would like to prioritize this year. That is entirely up to you. And with that, I'd turn it to Felice. And I think also if Will wants to say anything, because he was very involved in that meeting as well and gave great advice, which I believe DCP will be taking up.
Well, and I would just add to that, and I think it was a really interesting and informative meeting. And I thought it was great that DCP was evaluating how agencies were responding and handling their responses and looking to make it a more effective and informative process. Two things that I especially took away is they're looking for it to be as specific as possible. So if we ask for something, to the extent that we can be specific and is exactly what we want the city to fund, that is helpful. If we want to just make a policy statement because we want to get the word out there about something, that's fine too. And the other thing they added, because the question had come up before about the sheer number of things we had, and would it be more effective if we limited it to just 3 things or 5 item requests? And what DCP pointed out is that it goes to each city agency. So really there's no value in limiting, or there's no need, I should say, to limit it to just a handful of items. Each agency is evaluating it within their own agency's budget. What he did point out within the Parks Department is that the Parks Department is not in control of their own capital budget. They do not get an independent capital budget. And so they're always looking for piecing together that kind of city council incremental funding to put together a capital program. So I thought those were interesting tidbits of the discussion. Will, is there anything else you'd like to add?
And just quickly, the one thing I would definitely like us to go over is they recommended that we remove certain things, which they highlighted in red. And once Will shares that spreadsheet in the chat, I would like everyone to pay attention to that. Of course, if the committee decides to keep them, you know, we can, but I think that's just one thing we definitely should take note of. And with that, I'll turn it to Will.
Yeah, so the meeting that we're talking about here is actually an offshoot from all of the district managers in Manhattan have actually been having these sort of ongoing meetings with the two agencies that oversee how community boards submit their district needs statement and budget priorities list and receive responses from agencies. So those two agencies, for anybody who isn't sure, and I think there's probably a couple who aren't this far into the weeds of city budget, but the Department of City Planning actually hosts the portal where we submit our district needs statement and budget priorities, and they work with the Office of Management and Budget, OMB. So you're going to hear a lot of us talking about DCP and OMB. Those two agencies oversee this process, and OMB gets the answers from all the other relevant agencies that we submit our requests to, and then provides them back to us with DCP's help. And so we've been meeting, district managers have been meeting with DCP and OMB a couple of times and going over how we could streamline the process, how we could get better answers, get more, get more timely answers, and get more productive use of everyone's time in this process. And so one of the things that they offered was to go line by line and look at each response. And you would not be surprised that even DCP finds many of the answers that we get is completely unsatisfactory. And, they try and push, and they're going to try and push more to get better answers from the agencies, so OMB. But ultimately it is up to each individual agency on how they want to respond to our requests. The one thing that is worth pointing out as we're about to go into like looking at ordering lists and everything, and this is one of the things that we talked about with DCP and OMB, is that agencies actually only receive their numbered items in the list. So if we make 25 requests and 5 of those are for the Parks Department, the Parks Department will only see those 5 requests, and they will only see the numbers in which like we've assigned them, but they won't know what's ahead of them or what's below them. And they're actually going to look into seeing if they can actually make those just agency by agency lists instead of so like they get 1 through 5 instead of seeing that it's number 6, number 8, number 12, and number 27. So that's something that I would caution everybody who wants to shorten our list, that agencies really only see just their version of the list. So if we have one agency receiving 10 different things, maybe we do want to trim that up, but don't let the length of the list necessarily cloud how you view what needs to go on the list. And then the other thing that they made sure to point out, and as I think Rebecca and Felice both pointed out, it is okay for us to make policy statements in our district needs statement and our budget priorities, but it is also highly encouraged to find ways to be as specific as possible about individual requests. So if we make a policy statement, we all just sort of need to agree that we're going to get a policy statement answer back, which is going to be an unsatisfactory response probably, but we can always still say that what we need is more homeless shelters or whatever, or more affordable housing. Those are policy statements. We all kind of agree with those statements, but the more granular we can get about saying like we need a new swing set at this park or whatever, those are the types of responses that will get agencies will actually be able to respond to in a much more meaningful way. So I think that's really all that I wanted to flag in advance. You do have a hand up from Valerie if you.
And quickly before we call on Valerie, I just wanted to clarify that it's the park's capital request that we should maybe reconsider. We can still do expense requests. And I think it would be if everyone agrees, maybe we should dive in to the budget request and then get to the district needs statement. And if anyone would like it to do it in a different order, please raise your hand. With that, I think we should call on Valerie.
Hi, I just had a quick question. Felice, when you were saying that the Parks Department doesn't have their own budget, what do you mean? I mean, they rely on like council persons to get their, I mean, how does that work?
Yes, the Parks Department does not have a capital budget. So it's not like the Parks Department gets, a certain amount of, $100 million a year that they get to decide what their capital priorities are. The Parks Department capital program is really funded by those council funding sources, which is why they're always kind of aggregating little bits and pieces of funding together until they have enough money to move forward with a capital project.
Okay,
Same with HPD.
Yeah, the point is that they don't have a year-over-year baseline capital budget.
just an operating budget.
Yeah, they have a operating budget that's
Well,
that's baselined, but then they have, and then they get also like councilmanic money and stuff like that for operating, expense budget. But either the mayor funds specific projects, or the council or other entities fund a specific project, and that goes into their capital budget.
but don't they have like a 5-year capital plan of some kind?
Not really. I mean, they do to the extent, and will correct me, but I think they do to the extent that it's gotten funding so they can identify and work with city council members on where the priorities lie. XYZ project is in especially poor condition. We need funding for this, but they're not masters of their own domain, so to speak.
Okay, thanks.
Well, do you need me to send you the spreadsheet to share in the chat?
I just remembered how to open things in, I was trying to make it a Google Drive link, and so I was struggling with that, and then I remembered how to do it. So if you have it in a Google Drive link already, okay. So it's just taking a second to create. All right, everybody can check their chat. You'll see a link to the breakdown that DCP gave us of what they thought was, our response, our district, our budget priorities, and what they recommended to remove, what they recommended to amend, what received issue with an agency's response, what was sort of an open question, and what was a policy request. And that they would say you should move that to your that they would recommend that you move to our narrative section. So for anybody who's not familiar or needs a reminder, there are 2 sections to the document that we're creating. One is a list of budget priorities. They are numbered. They're actually divided in half. One is expense, so operating budget sort of stuff, and one is capital. So any infrastructure defined by, I think it has to have a lifespan of at least 5 years and be worth $50,000 or something like that. Then the other section of it is a narrative section that goes through different policy areas. So infrastructure, housing, transportation, each of those areas, and those are assigned to sort of individual agencies. But we would then rank a top rated issue for that agency area. And then we would write a narrative about what the community board feels are important programs, policies, projects that each of those policy areas are reflected. I also put 2 other things in the chat as as people are looking through this spreadsheet. The first one is the minutes from last month's meeting, which includes a great spreadsheet that police made of the policy area issues and what people who took our survey, decided were the top areas. And then the other thing I'll put in is last year's district needs statement, so that people can look through those as we are talking. Both of those are obviously available on our website if anybody wants to jump the gun and find them yourself. But I'm gonna put those in the chat for everybody, and with that, I'll hand it back over to Felice and Rebecca.
Thanks, Will. Are you able to open and share the document just so we can all be talking through it?
Yeah.
The spreadsheet.
The spreadsheet. Yeah. Give me 4.5 seconds.
Sure. And so just briefly, the top priorities, and in the minutes from the last meeting, I summarized kind of the top priorities that people in the community listed. Crime. So while affordable housing is always an issue, especially, in New York City, certainly, but especially in this neighborhood, in the past, we've gotten a lot of comments about schools, the need for additional school capacity. This year, the overwhelming commentary was about quality of life issues, crime and public safety, homelessness, street conditions, but all kind of related to what are essentially quality of life issues in the neighborhood. So I just wanted to point that out. So Rebecca, do you want to kick off going through the chart?
Yeah, so I think, again, I didn't see anyone object. We'd like to go through our request before getting to the district needs statement. I think going through the request will inform what our pressing issues are. I did see we were joined by a member of the public, Andrew Fine. If he would like to speak, I think that would be great before we get into the nitty gritty. If you don't want to speak, Andrew, that's fine too, but I thought I would give you the opportunity.
Gee, thanks. I was not prepared to speak, but would love to see some action on quality of life. Thank you.
Great. So I don't see any other hands raised, so we can start going through the items, and of course, we'll explain if anyone has questions, read the highlights that the Department of City Planning did. So Felice, do you want to take the first couple?
Sure. Let me switch over to the spreadsheet so I have sides that I can actually read. Sorry.
Do you want to just start with one group so I can filter out the expense ones and we can just look at capital?
Yeah.
Would that be helpful?
Yeah, that's a good idea.
It does remove some of our legend, but that's okay. I think everybody can remember what it said.
Okay, and so our top issue has been the need for additional school needs and school seats in the district, something that the Department of Education has said is not needed for our district. And the response has been that we're located in a sub-district without an identified seat need. And if you review the School Construction Authority's capital program and the DOE's estimate of school needs, that is what they include. So I don't know
if anyone,
go ahead.
If anyone has comments on this, I think it's interesting that this has been our top request for a long time. So clearly, either this board or the public has expressed a disagreement with their response. So if anyone wants to speak to that, Judy.
And I just want to add, sorry, before we get to you, Judy, is I do wonder to what extent it is dated. When my daughter was in public schools in the district, there were 31 or more students in a classroom. And now when you look at some of the public school guides, it shows that there are 20 some odd kids in a classroom. We have talked about a need for pre-K seats or early childhood education, and I think there has been an expansion, and a number of those seats have opened up in this district. So I apologize, Judy. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to give a little background because I've been going to these meetings, since for 30 years now. And going back, at one point, one of our grade schools very quickly closed and they never replaced it. And since their schools weren't 30 years ago, that filled, the kids could go to any school. Then all of a sudden, Community District 8 became overflowed and every school had a waiting list. So eventually they finally replaced PS, I think it was 280 is the number. It's on 88th Street, if I have the number right. And they finally replaced that school and we got a total of 5 new schools, including a middle school in our district. So I think the fact that we need more seats has always just been on there. However, I will say, I think that I read the mayor or the council, somebody passed a resolution that the classrooms shouldn't have, depending on the age, the younger ones shouldn't have more than 20 or 25 students in them, maybe a few more for the older students. So if that's the case, then we would need more classrooms because the classrooms now are more crowded than that. Like you were saying, your daughter went to school. Did she have 30 children in her class?
There were between 30 and 35 children
Okay.
in the class,
So
but she's now 24. And if you look
So-
at some of the guides to the schools and they rate the schools in the neighborhood, they're 20 to 25 students in a classroom.
Okay, so I don't know how that holds up with what the current mayor wants to do or the current commissioner of schools wants to see how many students in a classroom. That may make it necessary for us to keep on the list. I don't remember the numbers. Somebody would have to look it up. But if we have the right amount of students per class, then that no longer has to be our number one priority.
I think one of the things that maybe we want to switch this to, or maybe not switch it, but add to it, is full ADA accessible for the existing schools. Vlad France, a community board member, a public member, went through the DOE data and found the listing of what the needs were for the schools, and it specifically lists some of the accessibility issues for the schools in our neighborhood. And it's fairly specific. So maybe that's something we want to be adding.
Absolutely. I went to the last education meeting and that's what they discussed. I think we had one school that they rated them between 1 and 10. And I think we had one school that was a 9. If you were a 9 or 10, it was considered okay. We had several, I don't remember how many schools that were 3. The school that was a 9 needed a sink in the bathroom to make it a 10 in the right place. But the rest of them, not handicapped accessible at all. So I think that would be more important to ask that our schools do that, or if they have room to put in elevators, etc.
PS 183 and a bunch of the schools that I think are in the Julia Richmond complex are all rated 4 out of 10. So those would be good to add the specifics of what the ADA accessibility issues are for those schools.
Absolutely.
Okay, Rebecca, you want to take the next one?
And Rebecca, you're muted right now, but a helpful thing for everybody that I had forgotten about is that there's a tab for capital and a tab for expense, so you don't need to actually filter that down. So.
I'm sorry, I'm just trying to fix, oh, here we go. Now you have the full color legend. Could we have a thumbs up if everyone would like to go through everything first and then vote, or if you would like to vote item by item. I think it makes sense to go through things first, but we would like your input on that. I see Abraham gave a thumbs up. Alita. I think that's what we'll do. I don't see any objections. So the next is, again, about education, Fund 3K and pre-K seats in CB8. The response we got was contact the community board unit and OMB for information regarding this request. I would like to add a caveat here, which is that seems to be the response, according to DCP, that we get when agencies do not fill out their responses on time. I don't know, Will, if you have anything to add to that.
That is correct.
So we do have an opportunity to add clarity. I don't think we need it. That being said, it is unlikely that their response is going to change in terms of either saying further study is needed or that we are in a sub-district without identified seat needs. Does anyone have any comments on this item?
So several early childhood programs, schools have opened in the community. So I think to a certain extent this is addressed, and unless we can get specific data on, we've added X number of more seats, but we need Y more because there's more families moving into the community or whatever that is. I mean, we could keep it in, but I don't have specifics to add to it. And just adding that there are several new programs that have opened in the district. So I don't know if anyone has anything to add to it. I don't have young children to have a specific experience with this.
Don't see any hands, so I think you can take the next one.
Okay, so the next one is NYCHA. And this was that they followed up. It's an open question. They weren't unsatisfied with NYCHA's response. And they said, you know, in order to fund this initiative, contact local elected officials for appropriations. And last time we had gone through the increased number of work orders at the two NYCHA districts in our community. I personally would still keep that as a priority, since I doubt the number of work orders has declined significantly, and there is data available on work orders in the district that we can specifically point to.
Sorry, I just realized I was reading off the overall, not the capital sheet. I think their response again was, has the agency followed up? I think if anything, we should reach out to residents of the Isaac houses and Holmes Towers and get specifics to add to our rationale for the request, so that we're, you know, clearly targeting our concerns.
Okay.
I see Craig is here, who I'm sure would like to speak to our previous capital budget request to fund resiliency investments to protect CB8 against future storms. Oh, I see Ed has his hand up first, so let's call on Ed.
Thank you. Thanks, Rebecca. I was going to say on the NYCHA thing, we can maybe speed things up by asking either Sandrea or Wilma directly. They'll probably have an idea just in terms of getting information. That was all on the last item.
Thanks. And I think we can, you know, still request it in the same way. I just think adding that back up, the specific request, will hopefully help get something accomplished.
Hope so.
Okay, we're at you, Craig, on flooding.
Yeah, hi everyone. So I think this item is probably still just as critical, if not more so, than when we had it last year. especially in light of what we saw a few weeks ago. So I guess I don't know if anyone wants me to further describe what we were talking about, but it also is perhaps a multi-agency need, because whether we're talking about addressing some of the deficiencies when it comes to the storm drains and ensuring that storm drains are regularly cleared, because I know at least by me, we have flooding issues that occur at East End between 89th and 90th Street because of the natural slopes of the island that just bring all the rainwater down, and the storm drains here can't handle it. And we get regular incursion into our building here, even though we've done massive upgrades in terms of hardening with floodgates and storm barriers. But you also have, I guess, just additional infrastructure, I guess, rain gardens and such. I've seen some of them installed in certain locations, but I don't know if that's a program that could be expanded. I'm trying to remember if that's a DOT project or a Parks project, but
I think it's actually a DEP project.
or DEP project, whichever it is. But that's what this item is about.
And
And of course, just the general flooding that we see in general that causes, I think we all saw the pictures of what the FDR Drive looked like in the 70s. That's become a regular occurrence as well. So I don't know how to address that, but clearly there's a need to try to deal with it.
I'd like to add that the agency's response was twofold, right? First was further study by the agency. This request is needed, and then they said this location has been noted. We were
Right,
not
that was
extremely specific.
Right. I think last year we talked about Isaac Holmes specifically because they've had issues, but I think it clearly goes beyond just that one specific location.
Do you have any further recommendations to add? And I think maybe we might want to mention it in the specific explanation, the reason, right?
Yeah. I know, as I said, there are two flood-prone locations that I know about. One being right outside my building, one the FDR Drive in the 70s. So East End and 90th Street, FDR Drive in the 70s. Are two, but
did the Esplanade also flood?
I don't know. It's a good question. I'm going to see if I could pull up a photo, see if you could, if there's any Esplanade flooding that took place during that time.
And do we know if any of the subway stations in our district had rain, had water flowing in?
I'm pretty sure 68th Street was one of those that looked like the stairwells were waterfalls.
Okay, so maybe we could put this down for as a global issue, but then repeat it for several different agencies so we don't get the response of address this to your specific agency.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of which, that leads us to one well, let's call on Judy and Valerie if it's on the same item. I'm sure Judy wants to speak on the next. Judy?
Yeah, I called the EDC to find out if there were any flooding during this past storm on the Esplanade, because they're working on the East Midtown Greenway, which is out in the river. That's not in our district, but Andrew Haswell Green is. And there was, believe it or not, with all the rain we had, there was no flooding on the Esplanade that they talked about. They're also working further up and didn't get any response that there was flooding.
Thanks. Valerie?
Just to Craig's point on the FDR Drive in the 70s, and just what agency would that be? Because I don't think DOT claims jurisdiction over the FDR Drive. That's like the Department of Highways, isn't it?
Well, I
It's
believe
state
it's a state highway, but I thought that it's still serviced by New York City DOT.
Okay, that's fine. I mean, put it in as many agency budgets as you want because they'll get multiple review. That's fine. I just wanted to make sure it was covered. That's all.
Right,
Yeah,
we'll
some
go back to
portions of-
Judy.
Yeah, some portions of it are state DOT and some portions of it are city DOT owned, but
Yeah.
the city DOT maintains it.
Will just said what I said because I've been after the city about the piece from 80th to 91st that they're supposed to be repairing, and that's the city repairing it, not the state. Okay, so Will's right. It's both agencies, city and state. Depends on what piece you're on.
Yeah, okay, so the next one, we asked for expansion of summer youth employment program. They noticed that it was the largest effort ever. And they, city planning suggested we remove this item.
I think that's expense, not capital.
Okay,
The next item, which I'm very excited, is the first one where DCP agreed with our frustration and highlighted it orange, which meant their response was an agency issue. I know there's a lot of people who spoke about this the last time. We've been trying to fund a new air conditioning system for the 19th Precinct House. I hope we continue to keep this, unless I missed something in translation and we got it accomplished, which I don't think we did. I would like to keep this high up and figure out if anyone has ideas about more specifics. Maybe we can include the amount of time, the years they have not had air conditioning. That's something I think we can do to hopefully try and get a response, but this is something we're not alone in being frustrated that hasn't happened. So with that, I'll call on Judy.
It hasn't happened. It's still needed.
Do you know how many years we've been asking for
No,
it?
but
don't
I
have enough
can-
figure.
I can talk to Mike Lombardi tomorrow and get back to you, see if I can get an answer.
Does anyone else have something to add to this or any ideas about how to, be even more specific to hopefully get a response?
well, we can certainly talk about record temperatures, the need and climate change, and I don't know how their temporary facility is powered, but by installing a new facility, we can help meet the city's and the state's climate reduction challenges.
It's powered by this big truck that's outside on the street. It's very noisy. The neighbors on 67th Street complain about the noise during the summer. It's the air conditioning. Apparently, it's not the heating. And they complain about it. It takes up a lot of room. It's not a benefit to the community.
Okay. Do you know how many parking spots this takes up?
I'll find that out tomorrow as well.
Valerie says 2.
Okay.
Yeah, probably 2.
Okay. Okay. The next one, wait, I'm not sure if I'm looking at expense or capital. We have,
The only thing on the screen right now is capital.
okay, I was just looking at the spreadsheet just because I can't read what's on the screen. It's too small.
We'll expand it.
So this is the FDR Drive, provide funding for the full-scale structural repair of the Esplanade between 59th and 96th Streets. I mean, I think there's at least 3 sinkholes that supposedly the Parks Department has the funding to do the repairs, but hasn't yet started. So we can identify these locations as the need for repairs to actually fix the underlying cause of the problem, as opposed to just filling in the sinkhole and waiting a couple of years until it reoccurs. That's one potential approach. Any thoughts or feedback on that? Okay, moving on.
Right.
Rebecca, you want
next
to take the next
we
one?
have, sorry?
Go ahead.
So next we have installed streetscape improvements, resurface the bike lanes on the Roosevelt Island Bridge for safety for bicyclists. This was one of the items that we were recommended to remove. If anyone objects to that, essentially they did install panels on the bridge to improve safety for cyclists. So if anyone objects, I would ask you to raise your hand. Otherwise, I think we can remove this from our list. Correct.
Right.
The project was completed, so definitely should be removed.
Right, and once we vote on, after we go through everything, we'll note that we're removing, I think it's item 7. All right, police, you're good.
Okay, so the next one has to do with organics collection. We asked to have organics collection expanded, and DASNY has expanded organics collection and recommends that we remove.
We're looking at expense.
Okay, so what's the next capital one?
Police, if you're on this spreadsheet, go down to the bottom and get the capital tab.
Yep.
That'll save you a lot of heartache. Next one is DHS.
Okay, what line item is that?
That is line 8, priority 7.
Okay. So here we asked for, this gets back to our request for safe haven on 91st Street. What has happened to that? This is an item that I think they suggested that we remove. They said DHS is responsible for providing a temporary shelter and does not make placements for clients into permanent housing. The comment was that this, that this should be removed. Any comments on that or feedback? I'm not sure the status of that facility.
It's not open. The longer answer to that is DHS changed the programming model for what the facility would do. And the service provider has pulled out of the agreement. And so they are putting the facility up for bid for service providers to respond to an RFP to take over the service being provided at that location. So it is not open, it is not fully constructed, and it does not have a provider. And we in our request, we ask for more than just this one. And so maybe we want to clarify that while this one is important, we also want more shelters like this to be built.
So we'll steal the words out of my mouth. I think we have an opportunity here to ignore a DCT's suggestion that we remove the request and use this as one of our more ideological and less practical ones. This board did vote close to unanimously, or maybe almost unanimously, to support this project. So I'd love to hear anyone else's comments. I agree that we can maybe fine tune it due to the issues that have happened with the 91st site, and turn it into supporting the idea of safe havens in general. I'd love to hear everyone's thoughts, including Ed, who's I know is co-chair of a relevant committee to this issue. So if Ed has anything to say, and anyone else, please raise your hand. I'm not seeing any hands, but if anyone objects to keeping this, and we can again readdress this later when we choose the order, if anyone rejects turning this into a more of an ideological response, which I think is reflective of some of the issues that were raised in the prior committee minutes about homelessness, affordable housing, quality of life, I think this is a possible solution. So if anyone would object to keeping this in our roster, please raise your hand. So seeing none, we'll move on and we'll keep this in the running.
Okay, so the next item we had was a request for accessibility at the Yorkville Library. And the response is that it is currently in the front end planning with DDC. So, I think we will continue to support the accessibility and ask that it be accelerated, although they said they recommended resubmitting it as continued support. But I think since the project is in planning, it's probably important that we still keep it as a priority so that they accelerate moving it from planning to actual implementation. Any thoughts or comments on that?
Will, could you forward the email you sent to us with the fiscal year 25 budget priorities for the New York Public Library branches in our district to everyone in the group?
I can.
We can pause on this one. Or turn it
Yes,
just put
because
it into the chat.
Because the New York Public Library said they had no capital requests in this district, but they asked for some specific support on expense items. Judy?
Judy?
Is the lift an expense item?
So the one on, I think for making the Yorkville branch, that's the one on 79th Street.
Yeah.
I think making that accessible is a capital item because it's probably more than just adding a lift. But actually fixing the elevator at the 67th Street branch might be an expense item.
No, it's not the elevator. I was thinking of 67. I'm sorry. It's the lift. They also have an elevator. The elevator works. It's the lift that doesn't work. The handicap lift that doesn't work all the time. It works some of the time. And I wanted to comment on your other comment, but I can't remember what it was at the moment. So come back to me.
Oh, I think that was that the Parks Department said that they had no capital request for this.
No. Oh, no,
Okay.
that I already wrote to Will. What the Parks Department has, and I don't know if Valerie.
That was libraries. I apologize.
Since
not
we're just
parks.
quickly, to answer Valerie on the parks, they get money to fix things that have to be fixed. They have that are major things, like if something happens at Gracie Mansion, there is a small little budget that the city gives them every year to fix things they have to fix. That's not what we're talking about in our budget. We're talking about major repairs to parks. Okay, but you were talking about libraries.
Yeah.
Okay, so sorry.
Okay, Rebecca?
Do you want to take the next? Do you want to take the next library?
Yeah, so the next one was 67th Street, which is the response was further study by the agency is needed. city planning said this is really an agency issue and having this open-ended comment, but maybe we want to be more specific and say that the lift at the library is not reliable and does not regularly work, and this impedes accessibility and has to be repaired in a way that makes it a reliable tool of the library. You know, maybe be more specific about that.
Excellent. And I do remember what I wanted to say before. You were talking about continuing support on the other item. It's my understanding from coming to these meetings, continuing support means a project that's already funded and is in the process of going on. The item you were talking about before, I think you said DDC had it.
And they said it's in front-end planning, which does not necessarily mean that the whole thing's funded.
That's not continuing support to me. To me, I think we have to leave it in there. I think continuing support is like Andrew Haswell Green, which is, 3 months away from being opened. Okay. But what you were talking about was not the case.
Okay, thanks. Rebecca?
Sorry, I'm on mute. So I'm very excited to talk about the next item because this is the first item of ours where they recommended us include the request in the narrative sections instead of as a policy request, instead of in our budget priorities. I want to call attention to everyone and say that as long as I've been on the board, I'm pretty sure affordable housing has been one of our top 3 pressing concerns. I personally would not like to see it moved out of our priorities just because it's a policy concern, but I would love to hear everyone else's thoughts.
And within that, I wonder to what extent our specific rezoning request for part of the district should be included as a way of addressing housing issues.
I'm glad to see Ed's hand is up.
Yeah, I wasn't sure. Sorry, I'm a little fuzzy. I'm trying to read the portion here. The agency will try to, what does this accommodate this issue within existing resources? Boy, that's such pablum. I don't know what really to say about that. I don't know what you would like me to add. I feel like we should add something.
I think basically it's, and I think you're the perfect person to speak to it. We view our capital and expense budget, request as, a statement in addition to the district needs statement of what we prioritize. And I think just because DCP doesn't think we're going to get a response from an agency doesn't necessarily mean it's worth removing such an important issue that's consistently been in the top 3 for our board from, our very specific requests that get sent to agencies. So we'll let Ed and then we'll call on Boaz. But Ed, if you want to add anything.
No, I mean, I think you're right. It's something we're going to be talking about in November and December. I don't know. I wish I had something clever to add. I don't want to waste our time. We have a long list. So if something does come to me, I'm sorry, that's sort of feckless, but I'd rather move the meeting along than just blather. So I'll give up the rest of my time to Boaz.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so, I understand what you're saying about the affordable housing. Everyone wants affordable housing. But I've been in many meetings of different committees of housing, of community board date in the last year. I heard a lot of smart people. One time they brought, I don't know, one of the college professor that is expert. The bottom line there, what I understand, there is a 0 chance of more affordable housing here in Upper East Side. Many reasons, but the main reason is because I think that the money is coming from federal government, and the federal government is not going to spend more money. Another reason, more specific, is that the land of Upper East Side, it's the most expensive area. I don't know, not in New York, but maybe in the world, right? Everyone wants to be in Upper East Side. If you do want to write something regarding budget and housing, but again, I want more. I mean, I want more. I'm a market rate. I live in a market rate apartment, but if you want to reduce or add more housing, you want to increase the number of apartments available in Upper East Side. So I would say add something like someone mentioned, zoning. Change the zoning laws to, I don't know, increase the apartments in the area. But I don't know. I mean, I heard that the mayor is trying to do something, by Eric Adams, but it's from affordable housing. I was very big supporter of affordable housing. Yeah, let's build more. But after really learning the subject and hearing a lot of experts, it's not going to happen. It just doesn't going to happen here in Upper East Side, Community Board 8. There's just not, the land is not available. The land is super expensive, and there's no money for it, and it is what it is. That's my take. So I think it makes sense. I know it's hard, but it makes sense not to have it in our top priority, because regardless of the list, I mean, from what I understand, all our priority usually the decision makers just ignore. So I mean, it's it should be somewhere, but not in the top list. I hope it makes sense. Thank you.
Well, I would just like to add, I'm sorry, I was having a little bit of dinner there. It has always been in our top 3 priorities for a district needs statement, but it's actually relatively low down on our capital request. That number 10. So I think there are 2 different issues there, right? Is it going to continue to be one of our top 3 issues? And is it something we want to keep policy-wise on our budget requests? Valerie.
Well, maybe we can keep it in the narrative too. I mean, there are other ways to do the affordable housing. I mean, there's a lot of housing stock. It's just not affordable by the people. So we could ask city planning and or HPD to come up with a program where they would pay the rent differential. So the housing would still be affordable for the people who want to be in it, but the city and state would make up the differential instead of actually going out and building, quote unquote, affordable housing. So we could, I mean, according to what I've seen, there are plenty of empty apartments in the city of New York. And so while they're trying to figure out where to build it, we've got plenty of apartments going up in New York City, and the city could do it that way. So we could be a little bit aggressive in our narrative and say that that's what the other approach they should take.
Which is also a great point, because the HPD is one of the 2 agencies that we were specifically told we're not going to respond to capital requests. If anyone has a creative expense request,
yeah, I mean,
we could do that.
Yeah, we could do it as an expense request. I mean, my not-for-profit works with HPD to provide housing for women who've come out of prison, and we run a shelter, and they pay the differential, so they can do it in an apartment too.
So I hope you'll raise your hand when we get to the expense stuff. I think that's a great idea. Boaz?
I heard about there are lots of apartments available, and I guess it's true. There are some apartments that are not available. I mean, they are they are empty, but for some reason they are not available. I mean, meaning that we cannot search them, I don't know, in Street Easy or in, you know, in the Craigslist or whatever. They are stuck somewhere in the bureaucracy. But again, and something needs to be done about those apartments that are not available for the market rate. But I don't agree that there is a lot of available. I mean, if right now, let's say that Valerie, you find 100 available available apartment in Upper East Side, empty, and you put it, you can make a lot of money out of it. I mean, there are like 10 people behind that will stand behind every one of those apartments. So I do agree that we need to somehow find those empty apartments, add them to the stock, so people like me will be able to, I don't know, to rent them. But I don't think that, you know, I in Manhattan, the meaning of affordable, I don't think it's not going to happen. It's just there are so many people wants to live. It's a great city. It is what it is. I mean, there are like the demand is higher than what is available. As simple as that. Even if you find all those ghost apartments, that's my take. Thank you.
Andrew?
Yeah, just a comment on the warehousing of apartments, and to Boaz's point, there are varying estimates of how many apartments are being warehoused right now, and it generally ranges between 50 and 80,000, and I think it's probably on the high side. These apartments are being warehoused for a couple of reasons, but primarily dating back to the 2019 housing reforms that were passed through Albany, which no longer allowed landlords to take 1/40th of the cost of renovation and add it to a monthly rent, and made that number much, much lower. And they left one loophole, which was to allow an apartment that came vacant next to another vacant apartment could be combined, and then it could be a fresh start for a whole new base rent, which is a way to beat the system, so to speak. This is a major problem, because when you look at the number of apartments as a whole that are market rate, I think it's somewhere around 1 million. 80,000 represents 8%. And if you look at the number of apartments that actually come up on a regular basis, which turn over, that number is way less than 1 million. So this is a supply and demand issue. And believe me, and I've had this conversation with council members, our council members, that if we were able to unleash these apartments on the market rates would fall significantly, and it would be better for all of us. And this is something that everybody should really be on their local electeds about, because these apartments are just sitting there. And I know people that, I'm in the real estate business. I have friends that make a living by renting market rate apartments in the village, and they're hanging out the window right now. They're not making any money at all. And I was just like, well, that's crazy, because people are lining up for apartments. And they're like, yeah, they're lining up for the few apartments that are actually available. Most of my landlords are sitting on apartments and doing nothing with them, because they'd rather lose a few $100s a month than be locked in for 20 years at making $100 a month. So anyway, this is a major problem. And I would encourage everybody to reach out to their elected officials and say, hey, let's figure out like a middle ground where we incentivize landlords to put these apartments back on the market, where they can make a decent return, but just on a supply and demand basis, it would have a really beneficial impact to all of us, including me and Boaz, that are paying market rate rents in New York City. Thank you.
Elise, do you want to take the next one?
Sure. So the next one, we requested crosstown bike lanes. We were fairly specific. They said it'll be reviewed as part of a federally funded bicycle network development program. I mean, I think it's still a priority. It's certainly, especially in response to the death of a young bicyclist within the past year or two. I don't know if we could refer to any specific federal programs or just continue to include this as a priority. Boaz?
Yeah, it's interesting that bike lanes are priority. How many people, and maybe Craig will know the statistics, how many people are actually using bikes to get from point A to point B? I don't know. I'm skeptic about this. I'm skeptic because again, I know that there are two teams in the community board. They are like the car owners. I'm not a car owner, and they are the alternative transit, the basically bike people that are using the bike. I think that both of those groups are the minority. The majority of the people are the ones that are using public transportation. I mean, mass public transportation, whether it's bus or train. I think I'm not against necessary bike lanes, but I think that we need to be smart regarding this, not just turn every lane to a bike lane. And specifically that right now it's a Wild West. That's my take.
Right. So let me just respond to that. Well, a few things. So first, this is a resolution that passed by a very wide margin among by the community board. It's inaccurate to look where it's not appropriate to compare the pure numbers of bike trips versus other types of trips, because of course public transportation, yes, is the vast majority of trips. There's never any
bingo.
But in terms of the growth of cycling citywide in our community, it has expanded by leaps and bounds over the last decade, and over recent years. The pandemic had an effect on it. City Bike has been an extremely popular program. I used to be able to try to analyze publicly available City Bike information, but I don't have databases that could handle that many fields of data, because there are just too many lines from too many trips being taken. It's that immensely popular. So in relative terms, yes, the data shows, even though I don't have anything pointing to specifics in our community, that bike ridership has increased a lot. And I did a presentation at our transportation committee meeting this week showing that the number of injuries occurring for cyclists hasn't really dropped off, even with all the new infrastructure in terms of the pure numbers. But there's been if you compare that to the actual rate, there have been decreases because of the extent to which we've put in bike infrastructure. And that's not to say that there aren't issues with bikes and mostly, or you could say largely, illegal mopeds and illegal bikes that shouldn't be operating in bike lanes are causing a lot of issues. I don't think there's anyone who could dispute that. I think we all are in agreement that there needs to be some serious action taken in terms of enforcement. But in terms of providing the infrastructure to allow for safe biking, that's something that I think is extremely relevant and doesn't really shouldn't really change, in my opinion, from what we've done in the past in terms of making that a priority.
Okay, and Andrew, and then Alita.
Thank you, Rebecca. I for one, I think there should be crosstown bike lanes, and I would endorse that message. I do, however, think that the Third Avenue bike lane should be completely eliminated, as it's been an abject failure. Anybody who's seen Third Avenue over the last 2 weeks will know that there are literally, you can see, if you look down the bike lane, you see anywhere between 0 and 3 people in a bike lane that occupies 11 feet of traffic over a couple of blocks, whereas there are a dozen, 2 dozen, 3 dozen people on the sidewalks. There are 100 people in cars, trucks, buses, you name it. And this new bike lane on Third Avenue is an abject failure. It is a complete disaster. It's atrocious. It is creating congestion for the sake of creating congestion. And anybody who's been in a car, a cab, or walked along anything between 65th Street and 87th Street in the last 2 weeks will know that, and I can admit it, I drove along Third Avenue today, and I couldn't get more than 1 block per light between 65th Street and 72nd Street, where I then took the left turn to get to Park Avenue, which, surprise, surprise, is completely congested now, and also with a lot of trucks when it's passenger traffic only. And now Park Avenue is a disaster too, because of the disaster of the Third Avenue bike lane. So what I would say is, yes, let's have some quality crosstown bike lanes, but let's eliminate the Third Avenue bike lane as a complete failure. And we have uptown and downtown on First and Second Avenue. That's all I can say on that. Thank you.
Okay.
If I
Thanks.
could just,
Yeah,
if I could just discourage any discussion that really goes beyond what we're trying to just to talk about here in terms of what's actually listed on the on our documents. I don't think this is the time to litigate the Third Avenue bike lane, which is actually not even completed yet. We're really just here talking about the crosstown bike lane proposal that we discussed. So I just hope that we could try to focus on that.
Thank you, Craig.
We have Alita, then Ed, and then we'll call on Andrew once more. Oh, he lowered his hand, so he's okay.
Thank you. And I missed some of the
Oh,
discussion.
wait. So we will turn to Andrew again after Ed.
I missed some of the discussion, so I'm not sure if this was discussed or even if it's appropriate, but if you're asking for more bike lanes, I'd like to request funding for enforcement of the rules. As I think even Craig referred to, illegal mopeds or bikes that shouldn't be around, we need an enforcement mechanism to protect pedestrian and other bikers' safety.
And I think that gets to our expense request and is one of the things we have been requesting. So thank you, Alita.
Thank you.
Ed?
So yes, I want to echo the first 2 speakers in reverse order. Alita, yeah, enforcement. Yeah, Craig, very happy to hear you mention that. I think that's the first time in a community board meeting, and I applaud you for coming around to the enforcement because it is Armageddon. It is Thunderdome out there. I do see that someone got clipped the other day going the wrong way. The moped driver. I do feel for them, but they're going the wrong enforcement. Crosstown, yes, I echo what moving to Andrew's comment. I echo that, and everyone else. Crosstown would be great, but again, if we're going to be talking about policy and the allocation of resources, then I do think it is relevant, and I do think it is germane to talk about what is the disaster on Third Avenue. And I am happy to hear that all the money has not been spent on that, because I would, as a policy statement, say, yes, stop where you are, stop the damage, stop the harm. The problem with that, Andrew already articulated the bike lane issue. I will articulate the bus lane issue on that redesign.
So Ed, really quickly.
I know, I understand, but
I just phrase it in the form of a budget question.
And the budget question I would say is,
would you like it to us to add to the budget list?
Yes.
A line item for tear out.
Thank you, Will.
Avenue.
Thank you. I could have said that if you'd let me, but I do appreciate.
Sorry, we need to stay. I don't want to be here until 9:30, and there's a lot left. We haven't done expense. We haven't done all of our district needs statement. So I just want to keep us focused on mission, and that's all. It was not meant to interrupt you, but just we need to stay focused on budget conversation.
With all due respect, if I could have just finished, I think I would have done before the time you took there. But my point would be, yes, save the resources budgetarily and put them to taking out, if you can, that bus lane that is a disaster policy-wise. And don't, if you're going to do the cross-down bus lanes or bike lanes, don't add the bus lanes, because it has been a disaster on 3rd Avenue because everybody's double parking in these lanes and the buses move into the regular traffic lane. Thank you.
Okay, can we move on to the next item?
I promised we would call on Andrew, and I do see Boaz, and then we're asking everyone if they can keep their comments short after this so that we can get through the capital and move on to the expense item. So let's go to Andrew.
Great. Thank you so much, Rebecca. I only brought up the issue of the 3rd Avenue bike lane because Craig was introducing illegal mopeds, which obviously we need to get off the streets, as well as the injury rates, which have increased for all the bikes, mopeds, et cetera, when the bike lobby has told us time and again that the more bikes that were going to be out there, the safer it would be. And it's just the exact opposite. And it's even worse for pedestrians. As the only member of the public, I think, on this call, I don't mean to take up too much time. I apologize. But I just want to reiterate exactly what Ed was referring to. Yes, if there's going to be a budget item, let's take the money and just take this 3rd Avenue bike lane back, because it's a disaster. It's only started. It's only going to get worse. It is the disaster on 3rd Avenue. And like I said, bike lanes cross town, no problem. 1st Avenue, 2nd Avenue, great. But they've overdone it, and they've overcooked this turkey here. So thank you. Appreciate
Thanks.
it.
And before we go to Boaz, I just want to remind the members of the public who are here, you can speak during the public session at our full board meeting if there are any particular budget items you want to speak to, or if you're unhappy with where they're placed. I would love to see some public comments about our budget priorities and district need statements at the next full board. With that, let's go to Boaz.
Yeah, I think that you should just remove the bike from the list. And regardless I missed the first part of the meeting. I came late, but my suggestion, what I suggested last time, Bill, if you remember, keep it short. Every committee should, like transportation, should select only one item. And with the transportation, I would select either enforcement, general enforcement, more enforcement, or maybe something, add more accessibility to the subway. That's
So if
something
I could,
important.
I don't mean to interrupt you.
That's it.
What
Thank
we
you.
got from the Department of City Planning is that there wasn't really a need to limit the number of items we requested, because they go to different agencies and there are different ways that are viewed. But
I think from marketing, from branding, community board day, that's our, you could just, even in social media, that's our top 3: transportation, more enforcement, housing. Let's unfreeze the 80,000 apartments.
thank you.
Like one item.
We'll
Thank you.
get to enforcement in our expense items, which I hope you'll stick around for. With that, I think, Felice, can you take the next one? Sorry.
Yeah, so the next one was John Jay Park, and Judy and I have spoken about it. There's a bunch of work being done in John Jay Park right now. We should delete this item. There are other park needs that we can replace it with. One of them being repairs to the restroom in Carl Schurz Park, and additional funding for 24 Sycamores Park. Okay, Rebecca, do you want to move on?
A hand up from Alita.
Oh,
Sure.
Alita?
So,
Very quickly, and thank you. Could we ask for the Parks Department to find more green space somehow and use some budget money to create another park? As the population increases, the parks are getting to be like streets with grass rather than a place of respite. Thank you.
Thanks, Alita.
Do you think that's in our narrative, though?
Yes. Rebecca?
All right, so, sorry, I just lost where I was. Are we on
13.
15 or 14?
13.
Okay, 13/12, okay. Oh no, 14/13, provide new or increased number of sanitation trucks and other equipment, correct?
Yes.
And so their response, which is interesting, so again, it was highlighted orange, which means the issue was the agency's response. We requested the installation of capitally eligible rat-proof garbage containers with lids in CD8, et cetera, et cetera. The agency's response was high-end litter baskets are sponsored by local elected officials, businesses, community groups, et cetera. I want to again highlight that DCP believes this was an agency issue, and therefore we theoretically are entitled to request it again. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Valerie.
I mean, I think we should definitely keep this in. I just, I mean, I've spoken to Julie Menon about this. I think it's utterly ridiculous that this has to come out of a council person's budget. This should be something that's in a regular budget for the communities, and it shouldn't matter what your council needs are, that you have to have a trash can sponsored by a council person and then have their name on it. That's just utterly ridiculous. So I think we should keep it in, and we should definitely ask for more of it.
On the next item, thank you, Valerie. On the next item of requesting tree guards from missing trees and new street trees, I would, unless we can be specific about where this is, where we need it or something more information, I would call for additional funding for Parks Department and supporting the kind of 1% for parks, and if we don't have something more specific to add here. I don't know if Judy or someone else has something to add to that. Valerie?
I guess I just have a question, Felice. Is that that's a DPR issue and not like a sanitary? I mean,
It is a Parks issue. I think as Parks has explained it before, it's a community issue to maintain it. Judy, do you want to? I think you can be clearer in this.
Yeah, I mean, if a building wants to put a tree enclosure around their tree bed, they should do it. I think Parks needs the money for other things. I mean, if you want to talk about trees, Parks needs more pruners, high pruners. They need all kinds of things to spend money on. Tree enclosures would not be number one on my list. Okay, if we could get them to replace all the missing and dead trees that we have in the district that the Parks Committee has talked about, that would be a much better use of the money than putting a tree guard around a tree. Let the building owner do that.
well, okay, but if you have the tree guards, and if we have the tree guards which protect the trees from the dogs that are going in there.
No, they don't. No, the dogs go in over the tree guards and they go in there anyway. I mean, if you just walk around, you see it all the time.
Yeah, I understand that, but that's because they changed the tree guards and didn't enclose them fully and have them open on one side.
No, even the trees that are my building has fully enclosed tree guards, lots of high planting, and I see the people walking down the street.
Okay, I don't think this is so much an issue for the side streets as I think it is for the avenues. You see many fewer tree guards, at least where we live. Alita's shaking her head no, but I can think of 7 that are not
Well,
don't
then
have-
go to those buildings and talk to the buildings.
But the problem where we are is those are condops. And so the building isn't those are different entities.
Now, the building can still put in, even if it's a condo.
I don't see why, I don't
just
see why
want to
we don't
remind
ask for them.
everyone,
I don't see, you
I
know,
want to remind everyone that, that this is the response from the city agency was the, standard, they didn't get to our request, and that Parks is not taking capital. They're not
Okay.
going to respond to this. So I think
all right,
if
I
it's
would
important to
think this
everyone,
was
of
a
course, we can keep it
DEP.
in.
I would think this would be a DEP request.
I think it would, if anyone objects, please put the X button. I would prefer to change the agency. if
Yeah,
The committee.
that's what I'm
wants to
really
keep it.
saying. Let's give it a try at a different agency. Thank you, Rebecca.
Mhm. So I don't see any X's. So Will and Felice, I'm going to just note that we're keeping this in the list, but for Valerie's idea, we're switching the agency to DEP.
And probably
Okay.
change the language to where it says something about bioswales and
Yeah. And I
yeah,
didn't
that's a
see
great
anyone in
point.
the beginning. I didn't see anyone in the beginning object to us as we put this all together. Making sure we craft the language to get the best possible response. So again, anyone is free to argue with us, but I think if we vote on the request and you leave it to us, we'll do our best. I see Valerie's giving a thumbs up.
And I think for the next one as well, the Queensboro Oval, I think it's a dated item that we can remove. I think there are other parks priorities.
If anyone objects to removing this item, please raise your hand. Seeing none, row 16, technically item 15 is removed. I'll take the next one. Again, this is another park. Maybe Felice, as co-chair of the Parks and Waterfront Committee, why don't you take the next few ones since they're under your purview?
Sure.
And have the same issues.
I think these are, the next three, fund phase 3 of Andrew Haswell Green Park, the reconstruction of 24 Sycamore Park, and Samuel Seabury Playground are all priorities and items that need capital funding. We're in the middle of phase 2B of Andrew Haswell Green Park, and we've been pushing for phase 3. There is some funding that we received for 24 Sycamore Park, but the Parks Department has said they need more funding and asked us to keep that a priority. And the same, I believe, for Samuel Seabury Playground. Judy, is there anything you want to add to that?
No, you got it all.
So I would recommend keeping those 3 items in there.
Do you think we should adjust our responses at all, just due to the fact that they're capital requests, or?
I think we can be
Leave that
more.
there.
I think we can be more specific, and talk about exactly what needs to be done and what there's funding for. So we can expand that funding, that description.
Great. And now we're going to move to the expense request. And after we finish through that, I would like us to vote on it before we move to the district needs statement. And again, if I were you, I would just keep a note of anything you want to move up or anything you disagree with, and maybe we can get to that in the voting. I hope we can move through this list a little bit quicker, and then let's go to Will.
we still have our continuing support. The 96th Street Library branch can be removed. It is finished. So just wanted to at least make sure that that was noted. And then obviously 2B should be finished by 2025, but 2025. But it'll be finished by the end of the year. So I don't know if you want to leave it in. Probably should leave it in since it's not completed by the time we're publishing this document. And then obviously Rupert Park is still ongoing.
And I would strengthen the language about Rupert Park because it's been supposedly funded for several years now, and and it's been languishing. So I can put together some language on that.
But you can remove
All right, seeing no,
the 96th Street Library.
seeing no objections, we're going to move on to the expense. Elise, do you want to take the first one?
Sure. So we have asked for funding for additional 3K and pre-K seats. I'd like to, if we're going to include this, I'd like to have some more specific information, just because we have gotten additional 3K and pre-K seats in the district.
And sorry, I actually think I accidentally, when I was looking at the overall instead of the capital, brought this up earlier. And I know we heard from Judy about this, so I think we can move on to the second.
Okay. And here, I think, you know, we should check with Sandrea and Wilma to see what specifically is needed for the increased maintenance at NYCHA housing.
And we still have Ed on the call. Ed, are you willing to volunteer to call them both to get the specifics? Or would you like us to do that?
He may have stepped away from his computer, so.
I'm happy to reach out to them.
We'll talk to him. Oh, I see he's back.
I was trying to answer, but I was muted. Either way, whatever, you know, whatever you would
We
like.
just don't want to step over, you know, onto your purview as chair of housing. And I think they'd appreciate hearing from you and your advocacy for them during this meeting.
Okay, fine. I'll ask him.
Great. The next is something they recommended us to remove. This is something that I just can't help myself but think of Trisha, who really advocated for this at the start of COVID, which was about increasing funding for youth programs in CB8, especially, you know, summer youth employment. I think we can vote on this at the end. I have no problem with keeping this in our priorities. I think it's very important. And I think just because it was funded adequately one year does not necessarily mean it will be properly funded the next. So unless anyone has, I see Alita.
I just completely agree with you, Rebecca. During the pandemic or prior to that, I don't remember, de Blasio had cut funding for those programs, and it really doesn't produce good results. So I think we need to support something like that, something that's forward thinking and not just repairing damage that's been done in the past. Thank you.
Thanks. And I will say their response is because it was funded. So I think we can leave it at it as is. I don't even think we have to worry about getting more specific. We just want to make sure it's continually included in the budget.
Agreed.
And the next one is increased funding for rodent extermination in city parks, in the streets and in the parks. And, you know, as they've asked for us to be more specific on this, I wonder if we want to, in making this more specific, suggest increased rodents within, you know, 2 blocks of construction activity or something like that. Some area where there's just an increase in rodents because all their nests are being disturbed. And there is so much construction in the neighborhood that might be a way of being more specific. Andrew, and then
Andrew, before we call on, sorry, Andrew and Alita, just because I have walked home a lot over the past few months, and there are always multiple rats on 73rd between Lex and Park. And I'm sure if we sent a survey out to the community, we could figure out locations that don't even have to do with construction. The committee is willing to do that. I agree. Specificity will only help. But I think there are problem areas, especially due to garbage, in addition to construction, that I would love to get more feedback on. And let's just include every area we can. With that, Andrew?
Thank you. I was part of actually a very successful rat eradication campaign on East 86th Street. Fortunately, I had the help of our local council member, Julie Menon, who funded Wildcats, who funded some other organization that came and like basically gassed out the rats on 86th Street. Between 2nd Avenue and Lexington Avenue, we had over 100 burrow holes about 7 or 8 months ago, and we literally got it down to 0. There are 2 or 3 little burrow holes that pop up here and there, which they can come and spot hit, but rat eradication really works, especially the use of gas in the burrow holes, because that's where they generally dig their nests all over the neighborhood. I've seen it knocked out in a number of blocks, including 86th Street, which would be like probably one of the most challenging. I think Julie at one point, and I think she may or may not be funding more rat eradication efforts very, very soon. But sending these teams to exterminate, like basically like a task force, like you call in 73rd, 3rd and Lex, help, and the council member or somebody from the community, some governmental agency actually takes action like Julie did with the rat extermination on 86th Street, I think would be really beneficial. And it really can be effective, which is probably what I find most surprising. You can beat the rats.
All right, Alita?
Quickly, we can't just limit it to construction areas, the commercial like on 86th Street, but also they're in tree beds. They dug some flowers in the tree bed in front of my building and a rat came out, and I've seen them in tree beds down my street, and it's a residential street, garage, but no restaurants or anything like that. So we need the efforts all over the district. Thank you.
Yeah. And yeah, so I think Felice and I will talk to Will and Russell about maybe sending an email, but if anyone has specific problem locations in addition to going after the whole district, just so we can hopefully be more specific, I hope you'll let us know. The next item is about garbage collection and recycling. This was again a response that we got where DCP believed it was an agency response issue, not necessarily our fault, but that usually means we could be more specific in our language. We wanted to increase the recycling program, including solid waste, enhance funding for composting and organics collection. I think, they also, so they did the double. Oh no, I think this is the one, Will, if I'm mistaken, that we got them to add the orange in the meeting. Do you remember? I know there was one of them.
I don't remember.
Well,
I think
either
it was
way, they did say, you know, they have expanded organics collection citywide, but I think if it wasn't the item I'm remembering, the issue was our request is more broad. So I don't know if our response wants to be to separate it out. And with that, I'll go to Craig.
Thank you, Rebecca. I just wanted to point out that I think the organics collection and compost bins has been a tremendous success, but it's almost a victim of its own success. I don't know if you are able to see here, but you can see all these red circles on the map showing right now all the bins in the 80s that are full and won't unlock. And this is something that I see on a regular basis. And then by the time you get to a weekend on Sundays, forget it. You can't find anything within a mile of where I'm located here. So I think if we want to hone in on something specific, perhaps we want to talk about it. And I recognize it's a pilot program, but expanding either the number of bins or collections to allow for compost bins to be actually available for residents.
Let's go. I don't see any other comments. So Felice, do you want to take the next one?
Please, you need to unmute. There you go.
Yeah, sorry. I'm having some connectivity issues. So, Rebecca, if you could handle the next couple, that would be great.
Of course. Okay, so the next item will be to provide, expand, or enhance the out-of-school youth program for. Oh, sorry, I think I'm behind. Or
No, that's right. We did one for SYEP, and this is for after-school programs.
This is for after-school programs, and again, DCP recommended we remove this. I stand by what I said for the other similar issue. I think things, just because they're funded one year, doesn't mean they're funded the next. And I think this is important to our community. So if anyone wants to speak to it or disagree and believes we should remove it, as DCP suggested, please raise your hand.
We should have probably talked about this at the very beginning. If you haven't been following the news, the mayor has actually asked all of the agencies that he oversees to trim down their budget by, was it 15%? Yes, and so just because something's in the budget from last year doesn't mean it's going to be in the budget for next year, especially in the light of budget cuts. And so having priorities for these types of things is helpful for the agencies to know what they should and should not cut. Probably should have led with that and forgot about it.
Well, I was hinting at it without getting into, I should have mentioned the 15%, but I'm glad that everyone agrees that this is something we should continue to support. The next is other park maintenance and safety requests. Preserve funding for year-round workers and associate parks and recreation workers at NYC Parks and Recreation, including parks maintenance staff and tree pruners. This we got, even though it's an expense, we got the same response from the agency, which basically meant, if they say contact, the community board unit at OMB, it just means they didn't get to our request. So if anyone wants to advocate for this, I can't imagine we'd remove it. This is an item they should be able to respond to. Hopefully they will respond to community board requests this year.
And just to also give everybody a little bit of frame of reference why we got all of those responses from the Parks Department, their new borough commissioner has just hit his 1 year mark. So meaning that the time that we turned these in last year, he was like a month into the job. So I think they were just really behind because of a change in leadership. So we can hopefully—
You're kinder than I am.
We can hopefully expect a better response from them this coming year. And this is something that every year I hear their commissioner and their team advocate for keeping in our in community board budget priorities.
All right, so I'll go to the next. Enhance home care services. Increase funding for services to older adults, including personal and home care, transportation services, Meals on Wheels, senior congregate care meal programs, and case managers. We focused this on the Yorkville branch library. I think if it's something we want to continue, we can expand. I think it's when we submit these, it's through a very intense kind of application form process where sometimes we have to get into specifics that might not necessarily cover the extent of what we're talking about. I will say that this was another agency response issue. They said approval of this request depends on sufficient federal and state funds. As grateful as I am that DCP went through this line by line with us, I do not think an agency response— I see Felice is raising her hand. I think she's back. I do not believe we should necessarily remove. If anything, we should rephrase anything that is an agency issue.
And I think with libraries, I would just add that they had specific requests for those expense funding items that they wanted us to include. So I think we can just rephrase this and still include the library as a priority.
Yeah, this one is not, it shouldn't be tied to the library. Maybe I'm not remembering. Maybe there was a specific example. Will, do you remember?
Yeah, I think that this is maybe a data problem, that whenever they ported it over, it applied the Yorkville library to it, because I don't think that we've ever talked about that being a location for older adult care, because none of these things really apply to the library, and the agency is for DIFTA. So I don't know why we have that. And so it's probably just a data problem as they've exported it from their program into a spreadsheet.
That makes more sense to me. And hopefully, you know, now that we have DCP really fighting to get community board voices heard, maybe we can fix the actual program itself next time. The next item is one I would love to see be moved up in our priorities. This is something I spoke in favor of several years, which is to increase funding for community boards to support and retain staff and pay staff fairly. And it's not just that. We barely have a budget to cover anything. We have a very active board, in addition to having an amazing staff who should be paid appropriately. We have a very active board. We now have an arts committee. We barely have money to do our job. I'm nervous if we will continue meeting hybridly, if the Manhattan Borough president suddenly stops paying for Zoom. There's a lot of things I think we need to think about for the future. So I would love to see this actually be moved up to one of our top requests. This was, again, an agency response issue, and Will, Felice, and I spoke at great length with DCP about our thoughts on this. So I would love to hear some other people's comments. And once we get to the voting, I will be requesting that we move this up to kind of the top of one of the top items on our list. Valerie.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, it's our staff that's doing the day-to-day, and that has to be responsive to the community. And so this is an important line item that nobody else is going to fund, quite frankly. So while you can go to the discretionary budget to the council people for a lot of other issues, this is something that we have to be able to meet. So I think I completely agree with that.
Thank you. Alita and then Boaz.
I would add to the explanation something about Zoom so that they don't just perceive, if this is how they're skimming it, that it's only for staff. I agree that the staff is really important. And I think Will and I spoke very briefly about a year ago that community board staff have a lower pay ceiling than staff for city council members' offices or other comparable type positions elsewhere, and that shouldn't be. It's a city agency. They should be paid at the same rate as every other type of city employee equivalent positions, or however they're rated. But I would like to see something on there about Zoom so that they see that there is a community purpose as well. Not that staff is not a community purpose, but I don't know what kind of narrow thinking there is, and it always surprises me. Thank you.
So thank you. Two quick things before we go to Boaz. Number one is it's not just about paying staff fairly, it's keeping them. We have a lot of talented people, and it's really hard to keep them in a competitive job market. And the second is, Will, do you know what the character limit for our explanation is? I promise all of you I will work very hard to get all of your ideas across in what I think might be a character limited response.
I mean, I'm looking at the one right before it, and it's clearly, you know, we can go more. I don't know. I'm sure there is a character limit, but I have no idea what it is. So as you go to write it, I can probably get into the portal and give you a rough estimate of what it is.
Yeah.
And so we'll go to Boaz. Sorry.
Wait, 1 second. Just want to echo that there should be competitive in there. And that's why we could lose staff if some city council member is paying more than we're able to. That's not right. So you should put not just fairly, but competitively in there. Thank you. Now I'm done.
Completely agree. And we'll get back to voting or discussing where there should be. I think it needs to be in our top 3 at the minimum. With that, let's go to Boaz.
Can you hear me? Yeah,
Mhm.
okay. So yeah, I support this item. I think that you know, this is the Upper East Side. It's one of the biggest communities. You know, I mean, I don't know. I mean, community board, they represent hundreds of thousands of people, right? I mean, and here we are. You know, 11 people. So I think that you guys need to invest in social media, reach to the public, retain the staff that you have, and because local politics important. You know, this is where it's all begin, and I don't know where. It's not clear to me where are all the people. I mean, it's. I would expect that we should see much more people in such a community. But yeah, I think this is where it starts. I mean, we need more reach to the public. Yeah. Thanks.
I was texting with another person on this Zoom about how we wish there were more members of the public here. So we're very grateful that you attended. Anyone else have something to add? Then we'll go to the next item. Expand or enhance emergency food assistance program. This was, again, they recommended that we remove it because they continue to maintain funding for EFAP during the COVID pandemic. Funds have been added to budget to purchase additional food. If anyone has anything they'd like to say, please raise your hand.
Yeah, and I think those COVID pandemic funds are ending. So from my perspective, this should continue to be in there.
And I would like to add, there's Hunter has a food pantry, and we're running out of food at alarming rates more than ever before. I think the state comptroller's office also released an audit recently. I don't think because COVID is ending, I know we have a new strain, I don't think that equates to food assistance being any less of an issue. If anything, I think it's more with inflation. Felice, do you want to take the next one, or are you still having issues?
Yeah, I had to switch to my phone momentarily, so I can't read it. So if you could go through it, that would be great.
So the next is provide new traffic or pedestrian signals, increase funding for audible, accessible crossing signals for intersections in CB8. This is something I believe we have talked about for a couple years. They recommended we amend our request to include specific locations. We're lucky to have Craig here. I don't know if he has specific ideas for this. If anyone is unfamiliar with the audible, accessible crossing signals, we have those on 72nd and 3rd, which is a very dangerous street. Valerie and I and other people on this call have definitely continued to express that it is still a dangerous street during transportation committee meetings, but I really do think it would be worth adding specific locations. And if the committee is agreeable, I think we should let the transportation committee chairs hopefully get us some specific locations to include in our response this year.
I was just going to note that our resolution that we passed a few years ago didn't list specific intersections, but listed specific types of facilities and institutions that they should be installed nearby. So I don't know if that's specific enough, but I think can definitely emulate the resolution to try to hone in on those types of locations.
Thanks. We'll leave Craig unmuted. I want to hear from Valerie.
Yeah, I was going to echo what Craig just said, but also I think we need especially at major intersections where we have bike lanes. I know that it's audible, but it makes more sense this way. They can catch it. So that would be my other recommendation. I know we had it. I know we talked about it, Craig, at hospitals and rehab centers and different things where we had senior citizen centers, things like that. But I think we should also expand it.
I agree. And I will say, I do think part of me, wishes we could have an agenda so the public could know where we wanted to install them. So I think that's something we can decide when we vote. But I do think it's important to get specific locations so that we have a chance of getting this to happen. Felice, do you have anything to add?
No, I think that's terrific. Thank you.
Next, we have something that's, I think, very important, which is extending library hours to restore Sunday service. This is something our board has consistently included, albeit rather low on our items, something that's important. They did cite an agency issue, and so DCP did not disagree with our desire for this request, and let's turn it to Valerie. Oh, maybe not. Okay. This is something Barbara Chalky, who was a former chair of this committee, fought for every year, and I'd love to see our continued support. So if anyone has anything else to say or disagree, please.
And I would just add that the email that we got today from the public library included some specific expense items that they would like for the libraries that related to the types of programming that they would like to expand. So I think that would be helpful to include with this, and would add a little bit more specificity.
And I
Well,
just say that
you included that in the chat, right?
it did. Yes, it was in the chat. And the John Jay Park just further clarifies that I think some of these that we put location based just got popped into the wrong line, because clearly we would never have
I
asked.
was caught a little off guard there. Here we are. I apologize. Okay. Next, improve trash removal and cleanliness. Provide funding for rodent exterminators in all parks within CB8. We'll change that to CD8. Again, this was a non-answer, and I have already heard from the committee that they are very much in favor of rodent control measures. And next, expand street outreach to increase funding for mental health and other services targeted to the homeless, as well as for homeless services outreach personnel, especially during the overnight hours. DHS did say this project is included in the 10-year plan, and DCP did request that we remove it. I am uncomfortable removing this item. I've seen more homeless people on the streets, and I think we should advocate to make sure they're at least offered the support they need. Judy?
Sorry, didn't raise my hand fast enough. For the last item on the parks, the extermination.
Rodent?
The problem, and this goes back to what we were talking about on the streets, the best kind of extermination is using this gas that they put in the rat hole, and it's more expensive than what they've been doing before. So I wonder if we should be more specific when we write up what we want from the city as far as extermination for the rats go. I'll be happy to give you some wording tomorrow.
That would be great. We definitely will especially rely and circulate if, the eventual vote allows Felice and I a little bit of liberty to play with the language. We'll definitely share it with everyone on this call. That being said, if anyone disagrees with keeping the funding for line 15, expense item 14 about funding for mental health and other services, please put your X. Otherwise, we'll move on to the next issue.
And I would just briefly add that was the sort of thing that was prioritized in our community survey.
Great. And again, once we get to the vote, I don't think we have to necessarily care too much once we get past, our top 5 budget requests, et cetera, on both capital and expense. So I hope we can target it to make sure we have our big issues in the top 5, and then we just all agree that everything else is just as important. So the next issue is to provide and expand or enhance after-school programs for elementary school students, grades 5 through K through 5. To fund accessible and affordable out-of-school time and daycare programs in CD8 for children whose parents work in CD8 or work in CD8. Again, this was an agency issue. Does anyone have any comments? Seeing none, I'll move on to the next item. Enhance park safety through more security staff, police or parks enforcement. Fund additional PEP officers to enforce parks rules in all district parks. Again, this was a non-response from the agency. I'm pretty sure it's in line with the responses from the last meeting. Sorry, was someone speaking?
No, I think this is
If
something that's
anyone has-
important to continue.
If anyone does not agree with continuing this as part of our request, please raise your hand. Otherwise, we will move on. The next is to provide, expand, or enhance preventative services and community-based alternatives for youth. Provide additional funding for children's services, especially programs to prevent abuse and neglect. Again, this agency response was inadequate according to DCP, and I just want to let everyone on this call know that actually the first time I applied to a community board, I wrote about this in one of my issues. Our district has not been great on this issue, and I would really like to see our continued support of this budget item. So if anyone disagrees, please raise your hand. Otherwise, we'll move on. Or if you have anything else to add. All right, seeing no hands, we'll move on. Other expense budget requests for DOT, fund additional DOT inspectors for regulation enforcement of the outdoor dining program. Increase the separate, they recommend we remove this because the agency accommodated. I don't want this to turn into a debate about open dining, but I'm sure there's probably a couple of people who have something to say about this issue. So please raise your hand if so. All right, seeing none, that's a first. And next, other programs to address public health issue requests. Increase funding for the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene enforcement of all food vendor rules and regulations. Fund additional DCWP inspectors for regulation enforcement of mobile food vendors and outdoor dining. Again, this is a no response. Does anyone have any comments? Valerie.
Is that a no response because this is now under the purview of the Department of Sanitation?
So essentially, it was like the agency will try to accommodate this issue within existing resources, which is basically just as bad as if they didn't respond at all.
But I think that, I mean, should we put that to the DSNY too? Because my understanding is that that's now being covered off by DSNY.
I think that's a great idea. Will, do you have anything to add?
I guess that's a no. Can't hear you. Sorry.
I muted myself. Sorry about that. This is actually something we talked about so the inspectors actually are from the DOT. The hauling off of the like abandoned sheds is DSNY, and it's something we talked about with DCP whenever we had our conversation. I think it's something that they'll actually implement going forward. Is there's a lot of these that have cross agency jurisdictions, and they're actually going to look at putting where we can tag two agencies on the same request. And so I think that in the future, hopefully they implement that and we can actually do this to both DOT and DSNY, and so that they both know that this is a budget priority.
Okay. Well, I mean, on the
but
list,
we still have
there's
wiggle room, right? We still have wiggle room with our request that theoretically we could put it to both agencies.
You could add a
Correct?
separate request that's, like whatever 18A and 18B, 19A and 19B, that says, DOT, we want you to have more enforcement and fund more enforcement, and DSNY, we want you to fund more for removal of abandoned sheds.
okay. I thought this was also talking about street vendors, but maybe I missed.
Oh, am I on the wrong one? I'm sorry. I thought you
That's
were talking
okay.
about sidewalk cafes. Yes, this needs to
We're
be
on
moved to.
Department of Health and Mental.
My apologies for that.
No, that's okay. That's okay. I was confused to begin with, so it could have been, you could have been completely right, Will.
Yes, no, this now needs to go to DSNY.
Okay,
100,
that's what I thought.
110%.
But the one above it, Rebecca, I'm sorry, I'm like Judy, I
Mhm.
didn't get in
Yeah.
fast enough. Why does it say Samuel says or something?
So
Samuel
Will and I
Seabury
had figured
Playground.
out there's some
Oh,
weird
okay, that's the
data thing.
playground. Okay.
Yeah, that's why I got nervous with those Stanley Isaacs for this, or no, the library for the senior
Okay.
issue.
All
It's
right,
ignore
we're-
it.
clearly a data problem that
No,
they
no,
have.
that's okay, but we're keeping this in to ask for for more inspectors.
You're talking about
Yeah.
priority number 18?
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay,
think so.
all right, sorry, thank you, that's all.
but yes, 19,
Um,
we do need to change it to, well, so technically speaking, if you're talking about food vending regulations, so vendors still do have to pass a like health code, sort of exam. So if you're talking about health enforcement versus if you look at the next item, number 20, which is probably, this is the one that actually needs to be converted over to no. So we probably need to break these apart. Because this went to DOT. This looks like a problem. But
Yeah.
this one, if you're talking
Very
about health,
interesting. They didn't know that problem though.
yeah. But this one, if you're talking about health food vendors, and I know this is an issue that like the vending committee cares about deeply. But then this one, you probably want to break these apart for and remove outdoor dining from this and make it focus on mobile vendors for Department of Sanitation, and then because I see why we would probably did that at one point, because DCWP we used to always have a line item for fund DCWP inspector, which is a different agency at the time too, but fund them to inspect outdoor dining cafes. So the old sidewalk cafe program was a DCWP essentially. And so probably at one point we just merged those two into the one budget item, and probably could be broken apart. Valerie, you still have your hand up, so.
Oh, I'm sorry, I should have taken my hand down. No, that makes sense.
If you
Yes.
want to move to separate them now prematurely, so we can keep going, that would be great.
Valerie, you want to do that?
All right, so we'll
Yeah, I think we should separate them, but. And if we make the request to multiple agencies, how does that hurt us? Because I don't really think that they're clear on who has responsibility for what. And since they haven't really promulgated the regs for the outdoor dining specifically, who knows where that'll end up by the time the budget gets sent out.
Great. So this leads me to the next one, which I think I warned Boaz is going to come up in the expense, which is about enforcement agents. We requested they provide additional funding to expand the truck traffic enforcement unit. I believe, sorry, it's not off the top of my head. I believe we might have added other enforcement issues later on. I think that's something to discuss. I'm very nervous about some of the motorcycles and huge, I don't want to call them e-bikes, they're not even e-bikes. So this was an agency issue response. They basically said based on their latest budget, the NYPD has a specific budgeted headcount. I think based on the responses to the September meeting, enforcement for traffic safety is something that is very important to this community. And so I would love to hear anyone else's comments on this issue. Craig? I didn't get that.
I guess I'll just add that in the past, it hasn't even necessarily been an issue of funding as much as it's a matter of staffing, and the fact that the 19th Precinct's traffic enforcement unit is not, I forget how many officers comprise of it, but it is not a large number, and that there, I don't believe, is 24-hour coverage. So I don't know if that's purely a funding issue or if that's just an allocation of resources issue, but either way, I don't have a problem with adding enforcement, prioritizing illegal mopeds and other illegal bikes into that mix, if that's what we've been hearing.
And
So
before we
just
call on Valerie, I will just say, oh, sorry, well, I will say the first thing someone asked me when I tell them I'm on the community board has something to do with safety on the streets, whether it's cars, whether it's illegal mopeds or something. So I think this is one of those areas in which we might want to express the sentiment of the community, again, focusing on illegal mopeds, motorcycles, et cetera, regardless of whether or not we get a response from the agency. Let's go to Will and then Valerie.
Yeah. So I highlight row 22 and row 25. So items 21 and 24. 21 is specifically related to the truck traffic enforcement unit. So we used to get a lot of complaints about truck traffic being in places that it is not supposed to be. I think 84th Street where the trucks go across the transverse. I think 62nd Street where there's stuff going toward the bridge and coming out of the bridge. The NYPD has a specific unit that is citywide that is called their truck traffic enforcement unit, and they'll do sort of like targeted enforcement areas for like a week straight, and they'll give a bunch of tickets at that one location, and then they'll come back to it, you know, a couple months or, you know, sometime later on in the year. And that unit there's only one unit on that, and so it's not like they can be in multiple places at once. They have, and so part of the reason why we used to have this in there is that we wanted to see it expanded to be able to cover multiple places at the same time. And then we sort of have the catch-all hire additional traffic agents that do everything else for number 24. And this is for, we talk about bike, scooter, parking placard abuse, school crossing guards, and this is sort of everything else NYPD enforcement. And so I just want to make sure as we're talking about that, we see that we have both of those there. And maybe you want to do something with those, maybe you don't, but just to know that you have both
before we call on Valerie, I really want to stress again the illegal mopeds and the motorcycle issue. That is something I've been hearing constantly. So let's go to Valerie.
Yeah, I mean, and I really appreciate what Felice did in the last meeting. I went back to it earlier today about, you know, putting the rankings of what people put were the most important things. You know, bicycles per se and mopeds weren't on that, but I think that's like street safety and public safety #1. And so in that regard, in the enforcement, I don't know if this goes in the narrative or the expenses, but one of the problems with the traffic cops and these guys that are on the sidewalk, they only can write tickets to motor vehicles, and they aren't charged with really, their job description hasn't evolved to cover off the evolving transportation alternatives that we have. And so I don't know if this goes in the narrative, but somebody has to relook at their job descriptions to make sure that they're enforcing the laws, because obviously bikes, mopeds, whatever we're calling them, are not allowed on the sidewalk, and yet nobody, and the guys who are writing tickets to park cars.
It can go in both.
It can go in both. Okay, that's fine. I think we should do that. And that's all I really wanted to say. Maybe we should just be more focused on the e-bikes, and we can point to Alex Boris's new report that shows that those e-bikes, or wherever we're calling them, are 19 times more likely to result in a fatality than a regular bike. So we have the stats for that. So just for specificity.
I think it could also be interesting to ask for a study, although we'll probably never get it. But I found many motorcycles or Revel or mopeds, not even e-bikes, who do not obey the traffic signals. I think that might be an interesting thing, although I'm not sure we would get that study funded. Judy? And then I'd love to hear from a member of the public, since I'm sure this is a heated issue for those who remain on the call.
Yeah, I just wanted to say 62nd Street is still a problem. That's a block from 3rd to 2nd. That's not supposed to have any trucks, and they don't come out often enough to, it's posted on 3rd Avenue, no trucks, but they don't come out to enforce it often enough. And the people who live on that street, you know, those are all old townhouses. That's the oldest historic district we have. And you know, they rattle and the houses shake, and it's just not a good situation.
Well, and I believe they blocked the bike
Andrew?
lane too.
Pardon?
I said, I believe they blocked the
Andrew?
bike lane too. Sorry.
Thanks again. Just in terms of the illegal mopeds and e-bikes, et cetera, I think this should be increased as a priority. It's obviously a scourge to all of us. We're all like in danger from these unaccountable motorized vehicles. And we have managed to get Bob Holden's bill 0758 to register all e-bikes past majority mark now in the city council with 28 co-sponsors, including number 28, Keith Powers. Prior to that, Julie Menon was the first one in Manhattan to sign on to this. And we're now narrowly in the majority with 28, 26 being the majority. We need our politicians now, or our elected officials, to encourage other people, other council members, to sign on to this bill. It's a priority. In terms of illegal mopeds, the NYPD has confiscated more than 9,000 mopeds this year, and there are actually only 4,500 mopeds that are registered in New York City, which is just crazy. We know the NYPD is working on it. We know that Alex Boris has crafted a bill to require all mopeds be registered before they leave a shop. And I think that's critical because Flywing and Fly e-bike are just letting people roll out with 200cc motorized vehicles that are capable of 60 to 65 miles an hour without a license plate or registration, or a licensed driver taking it out, just a pile of cash. So there is legislation out there where we can kind of contain this Wild West. And I just hope that the community board and the elected officials really prioritize this in the year ahead, because people are just, I mean, people are getting really, really hurt. And more people are staying inside their apartments because they don't want to dodge e-bikes on the sidewalk. We need them to be accountable. We need license plates, and we need this to be a priority. Thank you for the time, and you've been very generous.
Will.
I hope everybody saw there was an article that we featured in our news roundup recently about the proliferation of these mopeds and how they're usually being used by migrant delivery workers who are not allowed to charge e-bike batteries in DHS shelters. Because the fire risk and everything like that. And so what's happened is that they've, when we used to always have these e-bikes that delivery workers were using, now they're sort of forced to have to use mopeds. And so maybe a budget item that we can also add, in addition to maybe breaking out a section to our NYPD request, is that we can also request, and this may be capital, this may be expense, I'm not really sure, is funding public locations for delivery workers to charge their e-bike batteries, because then they wouldn't be reliant on this illegal network of mopeds who they're being rented these mopeds at exorbitant amounts, and they're not able to license them because they're supposed to be licensed vehicles, like you would take them just like any other motorcycle to be licensed, but you can't because they're not documented citizens. And so I think that's a point that we might want to consider adding.
I think it could be both, and if the board wants to move that forward, it should be both. That being said, I think just based on what we saw by going through the items line by line, I guarantee our response will be, what are the locations, right? If we don't provide them. So with that, let's go back to Andrew.
I was just going to quickly add that the mopeds that are being used by these migrant workers are being largely rented to them by kind of a mini cartel in the city, which is renting out these motorized vehicles for $200-300 a month, plus supplying the migrant with DoorDash accounts and taking 20 to 30% of their wages on top of what they're charging them for their motorized vehicle. Because the question came up, like, where have all these come from? And that's really the answer. Sadly, on top of everything else that is affecting us, the migrants are not even they're getting taken advantage of, and they're getting below living wage and below minimum wage, more importantly. So they're kind of getting screwed over in the process. Just wanted to throw that in there.
And we're getting close to the end of the list. I know Will kind of summarized a bunch of our traffic enforcement type related requests. So Felice, do you want to do the illegal conversions and uses of buildings? And then we'll try and expedite it so we can get to a vote and move on to our district needs statement.
So this was something when we talked about it last year, we actually weren't 100% sure what it was referring to and whether this was additional data that was required. I thought we were taking it out last year. Obviously, it looks like we left it in, but looking to hire additional DOB inspectors for compliance and code enforcement. And I think the question really is, do we have something specific that we want to be referring to here? The response was more information is needed from the community board. And the question is really, do we have something more specific? Is this something that is dated that we're not really quite sure what it is anymore, that perhaps we should take out? It was something we talked about last year that we weren't sure what it was.
I think most of the people who advocated for this last year were not here. So let's just give everyone who is here a chance to comment. And then I think this is someone, if we remove it and they disagree, they can bring it up during the full board. Does anyone disagree with removing this? Does anyone have any comments? Please raise your hand.
I would just say that DOB is really behind on hiring inspectors and hiring enforcement agents. They're very understaffed right now. And so it might be good to continue to add pressure as we might be facing some sort of a hiring freeze to keep to keep the budget line down as they're looking to have cuts. In just for like the office staff, many of the complaints that we get that are DOB related require an inspection and requires us having to ask DOB to go out there and look at something. And so, just from an office staff standpoint, we would be able to turn around a quicker response. DOB would be able to turn around a quicker response to people's complaints if there were more inspectors. So I'm personally actually very happy to leave this in because I think DOB inspection is something that.
And then maybe we could be a little more specific here in our description.
Well, I think what, the GCP's response was, has CB8 contacted the agency? I don't believe we have. Maybe we can contact them before we formally submit it and again afterwards. Will, do you think that's something we could do?
Yeah, just give me a nudge and I'll reach out to them.
Perfect. Felice, since I think you're back, right? You have your computer working?
Yes.
Why don't you take the next few ones since I monopolized a little bit when you were gone?
Oh, no, it's quite all right. And thank you so much. Okay, so the next one, we're up to line 24, I guess.
We did 24. That was the catch-all for all of the other NYPD enforcement.
Okay, and so the next one was provide funding for additional elder abuse. The response was depends upon sufficient federal and state funds. So I don't know if we have anything more specific. I mean, certainly we want to have eviction prevention services for at-risk senior citizens. Are there any questions or comments about this? Okay.
Sorry, I know that this was added due to COVID. This is still something, again, they said the issue was the agency response. This is, I think, a very important thing to continue advocating for, especially due to what, Will and I mentioned, and Felice and everybody here about the decrease in funding overall. I think it's important to highlight human services related issues like this.
It would probably be good to have, if we can list some of the programs that they have, add those into there. And that way, at least they can refer back to those programs and say, we're funding them at this level, sort of thing.
Right.
Okay. That's a good idea. Next, we're up to rental assistance, further increased funding for more permanent housing for homeless. And they said, consider moving this to a narrative. I still think homeless, go ahead, Rebecca.
Please don't vote to move this to the narrative. I think it's very important we stand by this issue. Thanks.
I agree. And I think addressing homeless was one of the top issues that the people who responded to that community survey had identified. So, but to Will's point before, if there are specific programs that we could refer to, that would be great.
Well, I think it's complicated because, right, this probably falls under DHS, and DHS operates 5 types of shelters, a general shelter, and then they have mental health shelters, substance abuse, employment, and senior shelters. It's all about making sure DHS is held accountable. If we want to get into specific language about that, I would love to see it. But I just think it's really important to continue advocating to make sure our homeless population, especially those who are, in desperate need of further services to move forward on their path to permanent housing, that we advocate for them to get those services.
Agree. And then the next item, install new trees were missing. We talked about that a little bit earlier with Judy, requesting that they install or replace dead or missing street trees. And then the next one was for small businesses, create grants or low interest loans and other financial supports to assist small businesses. I think there's still small businesses recovering, perhaps no longer adapting to, but recovering from COVID pandemic. And I think we should do whatever we can to support small businesses. They said they recommended that we remove this. I still think supporting small businesses is an important thing that we should be doing. Any other thoughts or comments on this?
I think we would have to remove the COVID-19 language if we wanted to keep this in here. And then before we call in Valerie, who I know is the co-chair of this committee, I would also like to add, I don't know if this is necessarily the right format, but I would love to request, maybe it's more appropriate through a resolution, all the small businesses that were closed in our community district since March, maybe April of 2020. I just think that might be important information for us to know as we move forward. With that, let's go to Valerie and then Alita.
Yeah, maybe you could unmute Alita at the same time. I mean, I think we need to keep some, I'm not sure it's the COVID-19 pandemic, but we need to, create grants. And also specifically for our district, I think we should be supportive of the elimination of the rent tax, which hurts specifically small business in our neighborhood. Again, I'm not sure it goes in the narrative. I do think that Julie Menon, as the head of the Small Business Committee, has done, a good job of trying to make it one-stop shopping for businesses to open up, but I think we should keep this as a line item. But maybe just change the language a little bit. Alita?
I agree with Valerie. I'd also add financial and educational supports, because classes or programs on how to run a small business, how to file taxes, incubator, just things that help small businesses without necessarily limiting it to financial, because we've seen so many go out of business, a lot, of course, due to the COVID pandemic, but also due to whatever forces, and we're not even sure what they are, keep spaces vacant and rents not lowered. We just want to help support small businesses in whatever way we can. So
I would just, language like reduce the barriers to entry and just facilitate the creation of a small business, something along those lines.
Sustenance or sustaining or something like that, so that it's not just that they start, but yes, removing all of that, whatever we could, whatever help that we could give to small businesses. And so that would go for both columns. It's not just business recovery assistance, it's also business, any kind of facilitation or any kind of startups, that kind of thing too.
And then we're on to our last item, which is about elections and voting, where we requested that the BOE and election day support was increased, to provide further funding for more locations and more maintenance, staff mechanics available to repair machines, ensure machines are working. DCP viewed this as an agency issue response. If anyone has any comments, please raise your hand. Otherwise, I would like to make a motion to get us started. I know I'm chair, but I think it's appropriate. So does anyone have comments on our last expense? Seeing none, we want to vote on both the capital and the expense budgets. Everyone is entitled to argue for eliminating something we didn't previously eliminate or changing an order. I would like to start by recommending we move the increase to community board budgets into our top 3 expense requests. If anyone has any further comments or would like to second that, we can get into, I see Valerie seconding it. So with that, I appreciate your support, and I'll turn it over to the group to add any of their particulars before we vote.
I certainly agree with making that a top expense item. I would also put increased funding for the Parks Department as a top expense item.
And do you think we should include, just based on the responses to your survey, traffic enforcement in the top 3? Let's go to Alita.
I'm sorry,
I
yes.
see Valerie and Philippe shaking their heads.
Community outreach, but I was wondering if it's too late for funding for public art projects, public art. Whatever. I've been in a meeting all day, so whatever the word is.
I think we could add that as an expense request, with the caveat that then we couldn't include it in our request for further community board funding. I think we'd have to pick between the two. We could either use it as an expansive, right? Because again,
well, then
we
let's
focus on the
not do
salary
that, because we know how this. Yeah, no, we know how the city feels about funding anything. So we could look for assistance from our elected officials and private sources and other things. So let's just leave it out then if it means we can't get.
I mean, would you like to have a line item that, is asking for continued funding for like the Department of Cultural Affairs?
Yes.
Yeah. I think we can easily add that.
Thank you, Will. That would be great.
And since I'm not seeing as many hands up now, I move again. I just think we really have an opportunity to make a stance here. We already talked about the Zoom issues in the future. I would love to see the community board thing as our #1 expense budget. I think that would be a really big statement from this board. And obviously it doesn't negate any of our other requests. So if anyone objects to that, please raise your hand. Great. Does anyone have any other comments regarding expense or capital projects, and then we can move on to our district needs statement. And again, whoever proposes a motion, I would love them to just include that police and I, obviously with anyone who's here, will include you, have the agency to reword certain reasons and rationales to ensure better response from the agencies. So let's go to Valerie, then Alita.
I just wanted, I'm not sure where it is in the priority, but in the quality of life, the sanitation issues, I think we need to respond to the fact that quality of life was, 1, 2, and 3 in the top 4 issues. So, I mean, putting our sanitation requests and our rat enforcement up pretty high in our budget, I think that's important.
I have no problem with moving that up. If you have any like specific item numbers, please look at that while we call on Alita.
Thank you. I'm wondering if it's possible to vote on the capital and the expenses, because I kind of have to leave and I would like to have my vote made, if that's possible. I know it sounds a little selfish, but.
Make the motion.
You can move. You can move without doing the votes, because Valerie is still looking. You can move that you support the general premise with the caveat, right, that we're going to adapt the language, and then you'll be on the record of voting for the most important part, and you don't have to worry about the minutia.
Okay, I make a motion what you said. Thank you. I'm just zonked and nothing. So yeah.
I'll second her motion. I can't find it because I'm computer challenged now to pick up but I trust you and Felice to find the right numbers to move up.
All right, so then I will add a friendly amendment if Alita accepts it, which is Felice and I will take into account the minutes from the prior meeting, which include the priorities of the public, and we will ensure, without going against the discussion tonight, that we make sure the public and the committee's voices are heard, both in our changes to any comments as well as any order, if that's amenable to you.
Yes, thank you.
All right, do we have a call to question?
Paul.
Valerie.
And
Second. So I'm going to read the names. Oh, I see Ed is raising his hand. He lowered it. I'm going to read the names if everyone is here. And then if you would like to vote no, abstain, or not vote for cause, please raise your hand. And remember, to everybody here, we still have the district needs statement. Rebecca Dingor, I'm here. Alita Camp, Felice Barber, Valerie Mason, Craig Lader, Ed Hartzog, Judy Schneider. If I missed you and you would like to vote yes or no, please raise your hand. Seeing none, we'll move forward to the district needs part. Thanks, Alita, for joining when you could.
Right. So district needs statement, budget priorities. The district needs statement begins with a lot of, before we do our, it starts with a community narrative. So it starts with me logging back in. Sorry about that. It starts with a community narrative and overview, and then goes into our top 3 most pressing needs, and then we expand upon those. So we have historically listed affordable housing, parks and open space, and schools.
And I just want to take this time, the nerd in me, to remind everyone, this is like one of our only charter mandated responsibilities. It's really our time to express our deepest concerns and priorities. And as long as I've been on the board, we've had the top 3 priorities: schools, parks, and affordable housing. I think that doesn't mean we have to keep them the same. I'm not saying that any of them are wrong. I think it's just really important to always view this document as a living, breathing reflection of the priorities of our community. So if anyone has ideas or suggestions, I heard a couple of people talking about quality of life and public safety. Would love to hear from them. And I would love to have a full vote on the top 3 pressing issues.
Sorry for the problems there. I just wanted to point out that if you look at these, we mirrored exactly the list here. So when everybody did their survey, they were actually ranking the exact things that we had here. So if people want to take that into consideration, they can. Here were the votes from last that we put into the minutes last time.
Valerie?
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I would say is, and I'm sorry, I can't switch back, but I just going back to the schools issue and what Felice was talking about earlier. That seems a little bit dated there in the explanation, but maybe I'm not reading it fast enough. So I think we need to modify that. The only thing I just want to put it out there, there's nobody really on this call from Roosevelt Island, and I feel like we've left them out in terms of what we're looking at. And so that might be, maybe Paul Kriegler, somebody reach out to him and make sure. I feel like we need to at least have one priority that's coming from them. From a transportation point of view, we're really, at least currently screwed, if you will, in terms of the service to the island. But I just feel like that we need to put some priority in there from them.
Yeah.
I also just want to, oh, sorry, Will, you go ahead.
Yeah. The hard part of that is REAC is a state-funded agency, and they oversee everything on the island. And that's why, so we can't, this is only for city agencies to get. And so the hard part here is navigating that. We actually have to have a complete separate process for telling REAC what we think they should spend their money on, because it has to go to the state instead of to the city. And if you think about the one thing that we had on here that was Roosevelt Island related was actually a DOT bridge connecting to
Right. And that was completed. And that was completed. Yeah. So I didn't know, maybe I don't know, Craig, does the bike lane on the 59th Street Bridge qualify? That maybe we should reiterate something specific about that.
I think that is in our transportation section.
Yeah, that's just delayed for various reasons that I think aren't necessarily budget related. I thought, if I recall, that was due to the fact that it had to await the completion of the bridge deck replacement before they could move ahead with the south outer roadway being converted, and thus allowing the north outer roadway to be an exclusive bike lane in both directions.
Yeah, okay. I mean, all right. There were some pretty horrendous bike accidents up there fairly recently.
I really thought we had it in the narrative section for transportation infrastructure. So
okay,
maybe something that we
you guys,
I think I would like to separate the different, committees and issues from the top three. I do want to congratulate Felice and Billy, who used to be a co-chair of this committee, for getting 277 members of the public to respond to their survey. I think that's very impressive. Again, I'm not saying this is like all inclusive and a total reflection of the community board, but I think it's worth putting on the record that the number one rank for spot one was crime and public safety, number two, quality of life issues, number three, quality of life issues, and then we'll go to the second and then third and fourth rounds. The second round, affordable housing, which is something we have consistently advocated for, was the second number one ranking. Homelessness was the second number two ranking, and homelessness was the second number three ranking. Quality of life issues were the third number one ranking. Crime and public safety were the third and number three ranking, and crime and public safety were the third number three ranking. And the fourth line, just to get us through, is homelessness was the fourth number one ranking. Land use trends, which is a little bit of an outlier here, was the fourth number two ranking. And street conditions, which I do believe kind of falls into the quality of life issues, was the fourth number three ranking. I think this is very different than what we've experienced in different years. And I'm not commenting or judging on it, but I think maybe we should take some aspect of the 277 people and the amazing two public members, plus Barry, who I keep forgetting is technically a public member, who showed up tonight. I think we should take their responses into consideration
Yeah.
as we vote on.
And I think that if you drill down on the responses that people have said in the comments, which is not included in the summary, they really come down, they're interrelated to a number of things that we've talked about, and they fall into a couple of different buckets. But I think addressing homelessness and homeless services is part of the perception of quality of life and crime and public safety. I know that the police department has announced that the overall crime numbers in the neighborhood have dropped. I don't know how they compare to kind of how it used to be, but I think there is a perception of lawlessness, and perhaps we can tie it into and this will become a little bit on the expense side, is providing the outreach services for homeless to address, so to make sure that they get the services that they need, and that will address the community concerns as well. I don't think we're asking for, actually, we have asked for increased police enforcement, both in terms of PEP officers as well as additional foot patrol from the 19th precinct. Whether we want to include that within the top item as well. And I think certainly
we're still lucky. Sorry, keep going.
No, I was just saying, and you know, affordable housing still always ends up in the top, and so should remain there, even if it's more kind of policy oriented than specific investments.
So we still do have two public members of the public on the call. If they have any comments, I really would love to hear from you now. Otherwise, I would welcome a member of the board who is attending to recommend their top 3 issues. I think we should start somewhere and vote on it, and try and get a district needs statement that reflects our own concerns, but also those that extend to the rest of CB8 as well. Andrew, Andrew, let's call on you.
I think you guys generally have it right here. Like, it's quality of life, it's crime, it's safety, and maybe fourth would be cleanliness. But I think you guys are pretty much spot on. So thanks for putting together a good summary. I think you guys are on it.
Valerie, Craig, Ed, Judy, do you want to propose a motion? I don't think it's appropriate for police or I to do it at this present time.
Make a motion to approve the, what do you want me to say? They approve the
pick your top 3 issues and someone
okay.
can second
I mean,
it. And then
I think, yeah, I think the district needs statement should take into account crime and public as our top 3 issues, or top 4 issues: crime and public safety, homelessness, quality of life issues, and affordable housing.
Can I make a friendly amendment? And
yeah, sure.
We by homelessness and affordable housing together. I think
that's fine. I mean, to be honest with you, I think they're all related. So whether we're talking about,
no, of course, but those two, I just
we can hook those together. We can hook those together, but I think, you know, also homelessness is also quality of life, because mental health day, mental health has a lot to do with homelessness, and no,
it was very interesting. I recently read an audit where essentially DHS failed to give homeless New Yorkers with mental health or substance abuse issues like the proper shelter placement. So I think it's a bigger issue than just that, and I think it's important to keep
that's fine. I accept the friendly amendment. it's fine with everybody else.
Well, we only get 3, so
Judy,
it's
We
the
only,
top
well
3
then,
issues.
so if we combine homelessness with affordable housing, we'll make that one. How about that?
So is affordable housing. And
Crime
then
and
what were the-
public safety, quality of life issues, and the third is essentially,
because you have to pick from these, so it'll
Oh,
need
I'm
to either
sorry.
be, yeah.
okay.
So it's a check mark box sort of thing.
Oh, okay, check the
Um,
box.
So like in the narrative
I
for
think-
affordable housing, we can also go into
Yeah,
much
we
more
could
detail
talk
about
homelessness.
Yeah.
homelessness and homeless services.
Yeah.
And I don't know
It
if
is
it,
another option though.
Well, I honestly think we're gonna remove schools, right? I mean, from our top 3. I think that's what we're agreeing, so.
With the caveat that I do think there will be certain people at the full board meeting who will object to that. I do think we might want to remove parks and open space, obviously, as well. I know we have a very surprisingly lower amount of parks and open space available to our district, despite our proximity to Central Park. Judy, I'll call on you in a sec. But I think it's very important to balance our consistent concerns as a board, as well as those who express their own concerns as the public. Judy?
Yeah, we have less park space, but I think it's important the parks need our help. They're not where they should be. And I think it's important that we put it up there with the top 3.
Well, I mean, you could also say that it's a quality of life issue. I mean, because if you don't have adequate, place to relax and be outdoors, that affects your quality of life. So we can,
And the people who are
Well, is there a quality
Or
life?
have
sorry
little
to
money.
interrupt. Is there a quality of life issue as one of our 3 things we can click in the program?
yes.
also like quality of life issues is I have it highlighted right there.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
it
Noise,
note,
graffiti, petty crime, that's not great.
yeah, it's not exactly what you're all describing, because it's graffiti and noise and petty crime, which, we can all admit all those things are a problem. But I don't think that they're hitting the target of what you're really describing, because you're talking more crime and public safety, I think.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
agree with that. Well, but
So-
I'm not sure. Yeah.
I don't know. In if this is a legal document, the parks under quality of life would be the et cetera.
So why don't we do crime and public safety, because that really covers the quality of life issues as it's addressed here, and we can include in the narrative some quality of life type language. Affordable housing, which will then include in the language about the impact on homelessness and the need to address those issues. And then we can still include parks and kind of a broader issue of parks in the top 3.
Yeah.
My one caveat would be, I would hope we could include homelessness and affordable housing as our number 1 issue, more so because of the migrant crisis we're going through. I think our top 3 are very strong. They're important, but I'm nervous about the city's ability to take care of the people who live here who need our help. And I would love to see this board advocate for them in a certain way. And I think that is a precursor as well for public safety. So that would be my one request. I'm fine if it's not shared by the rest of the committee, but that is my one.
So it would be
Suggestion.
1, affordable housing and homelessness, 2, crime and public safety, and 3, parks and open space.
I think that's right. I mean, I think Judy is.
Andrew, after Valerie.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, Valerie, keep going.
I think Judy's, we have the least open space in the city of New York besides Central Park. And, I think that's a very important issue to keep in the forefront as we lose more and more of it. So I think that's appropriate.
I think it's fine as long as we don't jeopardize the nuances between affordable housing and homelessness. Andrew?
Yeah, I just think that like crime, public safety, quality of life were like really kind of top rankers, and now they're like one of the three. I didn't see parks really being in the top three there that you're
It's
citing.
if you look at it, it's top 5 is how I would say.
So you're saying parks is top 5, but now it's going to be top 3.
Well, it's always been top 3, and so if this was a survey that we gave out and received a whole 277 responses.
Right.
There's 230,000-ish people who live in our district, so representative, but not necessarily, scientific.
Yeah, I think I was one of them.
But sorry.
But I'm just saying that I feel like crime and public safety and quality of life are we're included in quality of life was like the mopeds, right? Wasn't that part of it? The mopeds, e-bikes. And I don't think that this ranking, I think that moving parks and open space into the 3rd spot doesn't reflect the responses of the survey that were primarily focused on crime, public safety, and quality of life. Just saying, I could be wrong, but I feel like it should be more of an emphasis altogether. And if crime, public safety, and quality of life are 2 of the top 3 concerns, I can understand how that would be reflective, given that crime and public safety, quality of life, and then quality of life are ranked 1, 2, and 3 in your survey.
So how about
Add to that, Felice, as a reminder that it's very difficult for us to get responses from parks, right, in terms of capital projects. So I think maybe we can use that to think about our top 3 pressing issues. I think a lot of our big issues with parks are the need to get parks, fixed up, recreated. Those are all capital expenses. We won't be approved clearly based on what we heard from DCP on that level. So I think that's worth adding to this conversation. Felice?
So I was going to say, because affordable housing and homeless really are 2 separate issues and really part of the larger perception about crime and public safety and quality of life issues, that why don't we say 1 affordable housing, 2 crime or 1 crime and public safety, 2 homeless, 3 affordable housing, and 4 parks and open space, or some variation of that. Rebecca?
I would just like to say that I don't believe they're just different issues. I think homelessness is a symptom of the lack of affordable housing, and I wouldn't like to separate them. I think I've studied this very intensely, especially as co-chair of Health, Seniors, and Social Services. When we worked for, we quite unanimously supported a safe haven, and it got stopped, not because of our board. So I would not like to see those issues separated. I think anyone who, again, you have to remember, everyone in New York City has a right to shelter, but you have to agree to enter DHS's system. I think that takes a big step, and I think we owe everyone who does so proper services and housing. So I would just not like to separate them.
Okay.
I was just going to
Right.
add that I think I agree with Rebecca.
Okay, so then we're back to affordable housing and homeless is number 1. Crime and public safety is number 2. And then parks and open space is number 3, because quality of life issues here is rated as
And here's
No.
here's a unique idea. We can either continue to include parks, right, as we've done for at least 6 or 7 years minimum, or we can be controversial and include the community board issue or some type of public funding for our business as a top concern. Parks has never responded to us in any type of adequate way. I'm not saying that open space is less important than our staff or our ability to communicate with the public, but I think maybe there's an opportunity to be a little bit rebellious here. Valerie?
Well, all I'm going to say is you get 10,000 words in each of these explanation grids. So I'm not so sure. I mean, yeah, they're going to put in a box what we think, but you're going to be able to explain what you're meaning within all of them. So again, I honestly think that we should put, public safety first, since that's really what everybody was, had first, and put affordable housing. And then, if you want to link it to homelessness, I have no problem with that. But I think if we're going to do, or the quality of life issue, look, if we, because Parks is ignoring us, again, this is just our declaration of what we believe in. We're going to still be able to submit the budget items to the various agencies anyway. So, we can, so what, that's what they think quality of life is. But in our neighborhood, quality of life is, it includes parks as part of, what we do every day. So I don't think it's, we can keep the language, but just check a different box. I don't think.
Well, I think we can also tie it to quality of life, and then we'll call on Craig, because I do think we have an opportunity here to really stand up for community boards. So let's go to Craig.
As much as I want to support community boards and our community board in particular, I do think it's a little bit self-serving to do that in this document. I think there are other ways for us to advocate for it and to be able to make that point without taking away from something that the broader community will be able to recognize when they're looking at the documents. So I just don't feel comfortable with community board funding being a headliner for that reason.
No, that's fine. It doesn't have to be in the top 3, but I think we can be creative in getting it into the narrative.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Does anyone else have any other comments?
I don't know. Is my motion still on the table?
I don't
Can
think
you
we need to
repeat
vote
it
on
for everybody in the
every
room?
individual
Okay.
aspect of the document.
No, I think she's voting on the top. Her motion was for the top 3 issues.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I think that's what, you wanted me to.
It can be an unofficial vote and then incorporate into the broader vote for the whole document.
So I'm making the motion for the 3 we talked about and giving the authority to Felice and Rebecca to have agency to be as creative as they can be and are. So how about that? With also part of the motion being to thank you for all the hard work that you put into this.
Judy? your
And
hands
the
up?
top 3 issues?
I think we said crime and public safety, affordable housing and homeless.
No, we need to vote on them though.
Okay.
So Valerie, if you want to make that to your motion.
Yeah, so it was crime and
Okay.
public safety, affordable housing and homelessness. Oh, I think we're putting them together. Am I wrong about that? Or no, yes. And then
Right,
the third one
right.
is quality of life.
Judy?
So we're not including parks, or we are?
No,
I
I'm
think we're including
confused.
parks in the narrative of quality of life. But
Okay,
maybe I misunderstood.
So I will second the motion. If anyone objects to calling to question, please raise your hand. Otherwise, I will read the names of the people who are still here and then we will vote. So it's Rebecca, Felice, Valerie, Craig, Ed, and Judy. If you would like to vote no, abstain, or not vote for cause, please raise your hand. Seeing none, the motion passes unanimously. And I just have one item of new business that we kind of addressed. I just
Oh.
want to make sure everyone who,
Yeah, do we want to go through the other sections? Or did we only want to talk about
I think
the
we
top
got
three?
discretion.
Okay,
I think we got discretion to be creative.
can I then flag one thing that I think we should consider changing? In each of these sections, there is the opportunity to pick the most important pressing issue for each individual area. And previously, instead of checking one of the specific items, we would click other and say all of the above, and then we would talk about the things that we like and feel. I guess I just want to see if we have a consensus that we want to continue to do that on all of these areas, that we want to do other, all the above, or if there's any that we actually do want to.
I would recommend, if it's approved by the people who are still at the meeting, that police, you and I and Russell will go through this, in addition to the other officers, which include Valerie and the secretaries. And we will send an email to this group of people before the full board. I think that's the most fair way to do it. If anyone agrees or objects, please raise your hand. So I see nobody. Will, do you have anything else to add?
No, I just wanted to make sure that we made a conscious decision to stay clicking other, all the above. I didn't want this to be something that was an afterthought, because it's not something that I don't think it elicits the proper response from agencies.
No, you're right. We're living in the, 10 years ago mentality where other was the only way to get what you wanted across. So I think it's important that we keep everyone here in the loop. And we really spend a lot of time ensuring our district needs statement and budget requests are in the shape that they're most likely to be responded to.
Sorry, what does the
Valerie?
asterisk mean? What does the asterisk mean next to what is the most important issue?
Resources.
Oh, I see. Okay. I thought they were explaining what, okay.
No, it links to things that are helpful for you to, they're just helpful links for, as you're going through these, to look at.
Yeah, I see.
And I think based on our conversation tonight, I think we can, I think we have a good sense of what some of the most important issues might be within this that we could highlight to really provide the important priority that that it's worth.
Yeah, and I would say that we also need to go through them, and there's some of these that do mention COVID-19, and we read through
We need to
these
get rid of all of that
with an explicit eye that,
Yep.
we amend where it's important to amend, since, we're not deep in the middle of the pandemic anymore.
So I'm just going to put it into the record that the members who are still here are me, Felice, Valerie, Craig, Ed, and Judy. And any further actions we take to the district needs statement or capital requests will be forwarded, or expense requests will be forwarded to that group of people for their input, as based on Valerie's motion, or Lita's motion rather, sorry. And hopefully we'll have something great before the full board. And thank you all for supporting moving community board budgets up a little bit. We owe a lot to our district manager and all of our other staff members, so thank you very much.
That's for sure.
Yep. Is there anything else, or is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Valerie. A
All right.
second. I think Will doesn't quite count, so Judy.
Judy
Just me
seconded.
waving goodbye. I thought it was accepted.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a
Thanks.
great
Good night.
evening.